We live our lives under a fundamental assumption, a belief so deep we rarely question it, that the world we see is the world that is. We believe that reality is a solid, objective, and external entity, and that our job is to react to it, navigate it, and fight against it. We see scarcity and call it economic crisis. We see conflict and call it human nature. We see limitation and call it reality. But what if I told you that this is the greatest of illusions? What if the world you experience were not an objective truth, but a projection? An image projected onto the vast screen of the universe, created by a hidden projector in the center of your own being. The forbidden truth, the secret of the masters, is this: we do not react to reality, we create it. And we create it not with our hands, but with our perception. Between the infinite universe of potentialities and the life you experience, there is a filter, a lens. An invisible lens through which your consciousness interprets energy and collapses it into what you call reality. This lens is carved with the beliefs of your childhood, polished by your experiences, and stained by your emotions. If your lens is carved with the belief in scarcity, you will project a world of lack, no matter how much money is around you. If your lens is stained by fear, you will project a world of dangers, no matter how much security surrounds you. This audiobook is not a manual for changing the world. It is a workshop for the optician of the soul. It is a guide to learning how to take off the inherited lens, to examine it under the light of consciousness, and finally, to polish a new one, the lens of abundance. You will learn that wealth is not a quantity of money, but a quality of perception. You will discover that opportunities are not found, they are perceived. The power to transform your life does not reside in changing your actions. It resides in changing the eyes with which you see. It's time to start polishing your lens. Chapter 1: The Inherited Lens. You have accepted the fundamental premise. The world you see is not the world that is. It is a reflection, a projection, a vast movie projected on the screen of the universe by the light of your own consciousness. And you have understood that the quality of that movie is determined by the lens through which you project. The question that naturally arises once we accept this truth is as profound as it is unsettling. If I am the projector, who carved this lens? Where do these beliefs come from, these filters, that color my reality so automatically that I don't even realize I'm wearing them? You didn't choose it. At least, not consciously. You inherited it. The first and most important act of liberation on the path of the conscious creator is to understand the nature of our invisible inheritance, not the inheritance of material goods, but that of the perceptual software, the operating system that was installed in us before we had the capacity to choose. To understand this process, we must travel back in time, to the era when our mind was a virgin land, an open field awaiting its first seeds. In the first 7 years of life, the human brain operates predominantly in a theta wave state. This is not an unimportant technical detail, it is the key to everything. The theta state is a state of hypnosis, of superlearning. It is the state in which the conscious mind, the critical guardian who analyzes and doubts, has not yet formed its walls. A child does not have a clearly defined inside and outside. It is a boundless consciousness, a psychic sponge that absorbs the world around it not as a series of opinions, but as an absolute truth. The emotional and belief world of their parents is not something they observe from a distance. It is the water in which they swim. The belief system of our family becomes the first operating system installed on the virgin hard drive of our mind. It is the default program that, unless it is consciously examined and rewritten in adulthood, will continue to run in the background for the rest of our lives, determining the decisions we make, the opportunities we see or don't see, and the reality we project. This perceptual software is transmitted to us through 3 main channels, each one more subtle and more powerful than the last. The first channel, the explicit word, the linguistic lens. The first channel is that of words, the phrases, the decrees, the sentences that we repeatedly hear in our family environment. For a child in a theta state, their parents' words are not simple sounds, they are incantations. They are the programming codes that define the parameters of their reality. Let's think about the programming around wealth and prosperity. If a child grows up in a home where the recurring phrase is, "money doesn't grow on trees," or "you have to work like a slave to earn money," they are not learning a lesson about economics. They are installing a fundamental program. The belief that is recorded is, abundance is unnatural and scarce. Prosperity is intrinsically linked to suffering and sacrifice. Later in their adult life, this person may consciously desire wealth, but their subconscious program will sabotage any opportunity that seems too easy or too joyful because it doesn't fit with the fundamental law that was imprinted on them. If the phrase is, "we can't afford it," the child doesn't learn about managing a budget. They record the belief of identity. We are the kind of people who can't afford things. We are limited. This belief becomes a lens that will make them focus on lack for the rest of their lives. This linguistic programming goes beyond money. It defines our sense of worth and possibility. A child who is constantly told, "be careful, you're going to fall," installs the program that the world is a dangerous place and that they are a clumsy and incapable person. A child who is repeatedly told the Perez family are realists, not dreamers, receives the command to limit their imagination and their ambitions in order to continue belonging to the tribe. These phrases, repeated day after day, become the walls of our invisible prison. They are the first and most obvious scratches on our lens. The second channel, the silent action, the behavioral lens. This second channel is infinitely more powerful because children have an astonishing ability to detect incongruity. They don't listen so much to what you say. They observe what you do and, above all, what you feel. The parent's action is a much more potent decree than their words. Let's imagine a father who, verbally, tells his child that money is not important, but who spends 80 hours a week working at a job he hates, with a constant expression of anxiety and exhaustion. What program is he really installing? The child does not learn that money is not important. They learn on a deep non-verbal level that money is a source of immense stress, sacrifice, and unhappiness, so powerful that it can steal a father. This belief is much more profound than any verbal lesson. The way our parents managed their finances became our instruction manual. If they paid bills with a feeling of panic and contraction, our nervous system learned to associate the act of paying with danger and loss. If they constantly argued about money, we learned that prosperity is a source of conflict in relationships. If they spent impulsively to soothe their emotions, we learned that money is a drug for temporary relief, not a tool for long-term construction. What we inherit is not their financial advice. We inherit their emotional relationship with money, and that relationship becomes the dominant die of our perceptual lens. The third channel, the energetic atmosphere, the vibrational lens. This is the most subtle and at the same time the most fundamental channel of all. A home is not just a physical space, it is an energetic field. It is an atmosphere, a dominant vibration created by the habitual state of being of its inhabitants. And the child, with their open, boundless consciousness, breathes in this atmosphere as if it were air. Did you grow up in a home whose atmosphere was one of optimism and possibility? A place where, despite challenges, the underlying feeling was one of confidence, that everything will be all right, that we are capable of solving it? If so, you inherited a lens stained with faith. Or did you grow up in a home whose atmosphere was one of worry and fatalism? A place where, even in good times, there was an underlying tension, an anxious wait for the next disaster, a feeling that life is hard. If so, you inherited a lens stained with fear. This vibrational inheritance is the most difficult to detect because it is not found in words or actions, but in the space between them. It is the sigh of your mother as she looks at bills. It is the tension in your father's shoulders when he comes home from work. It is the joy or the absence of it at the dinner table. This atmosphere becomes your default emotional climate. It becomes the fundamental note to which your inner instrument learns to tune itself. If you grew up in a climate of anxiety, anxiety will feel to you like normal, like being home, and in your adult life you may find yourself sabotaging situations of peace because calm feels strangely uncomfortable to you. The solidification of the lens. This intensive programming, verbal, behavioral, and vibrational, occurs mainly in the first 7 years of life. After that age, the child's brain changes. It begins to operate more on alpha and beta waves. The guardian of the gate, the conscious and critical mind, begins to form. And here the final and most tragic step occurs. The emerging conscious mind does not question the programming that has already been installed. It takes it for granted. It accepts it as the way things are. And its new job becomes to be the defense attorney for that programming. It uses its power of focus and logic to constantly search for and find evidence in the external world that validates that inherited lens. It becomes the curator of a reality that confirms its own limitations. That's why these beliefs are so incredibly resistant to change. It's not just that they are deeply ingrained. It's that we have spent the rest of our lives building a solid case to prove that they are true. We have been living in an echo chamber of our own inheritance. The first step to freedom is not to try to polish the lens. It is the simple but revolutionary act of realizing that you are wearing a lens. It is to understand that the world you see is not the world, but a version of the world, a projection filtered through the beliefs, fears, and hopes of the generations that preceded you. This awareness is not an act of guilt toward our parents. They did the best they could with the lens they themselves inherited. It is an act of radical compassion for both them and ourselves. It is the moment when the architect awakens, looks at the inherited blueprints on his table, and realizes with a shudder of power that he has the freedom to draw new ones. We have lived as unconscious projectionists, showing an inherited movie on the screen of our lives, believing we were mere spectators. The first act of freedom for the conscious creator is not to try to break the projector or tear the screen. It is simply to turn on the light in the projection booth. The greatest power a human being possesses is that of consciousness. It is the ability to take a step back and observe one's own mental and emotional processes without identifying with them. You don't have to fight your programming. In fact, fighting it strengthens it because you give it your energy. The simple act of observing your inherited lens with detached, non-judgmental curiosity is what begins to dissolve its power over you. Light is the best disinfectant. The darkness of an unconscious program cannot survive the light of a consciousness that observes it. The fundamental realization, the true awakening of the architect is this: you are not your lens. You are not your beliefs. You are not your perceptions. You are not the stories your family told you. You are the silent consciousness that is aware of the lens. You are the space in which beliefs appear and disappear. This de-identification is the source of all your power to change. As long as you believe you are your scarcity lens, you are trapped. The moment you realize you are the consciousness observing a scarcity lens, you become free to choose a new one. The workshop of the soul's optician, integrated practices. The initiate on the path to mastery does not leave this process to chance. He becomes an optician of his own soul, a craftsman who learns to examine, polish, and, finally, replace the lenses through which he experiences life. This work is not done with effort, but with subtle and persistent practice. One of the most revealing practices is the perceptual audit. The master doesn't take his perception for granted. He becomes an auditor of his own lens. He takes his journal not to record the events of his day, but to record his interpretations of those events. Faced with a challenge, a critical email, an unexpected expense, the initiate does not react. First, he separates fact from fiction. He notes the objective fact, the neutral description of what happened, and next to it he notes the story, the automatic interpretation that his inherited lens projected onto that fact. Imagine the objective fact is, I received an email from my boss that says, we need to review this report. There are several areas that need improvement. The mind with an inherited lens of self-criticism immediately projects the story. I have failed. My boss thinks I'm incompetent. My job is in danger. The initiate notes both things, and by seeing them side by side, the story loses its power. It is revealed for what it is, a projection, not a truth. This simple act of differentiation is an exercise of immense power. To release the emotional energy trapped in these inherited beliefs, the master does not reject them with anger. He honors and releases them with love. He enters into a silent, ancestral dialogue. In the stillness of his meditation, or on the pages of his journal, He enters a conversation with the sources of his programming. He says to his parents, to his ancestors, "Thank you. Thank you for the lens you gave me. I understand that it was your best tool for survival, the one that allowed you to navigate your own world. I accept it as a gift made from love and protection." And then, with a quiet but firm sovereignty, he adds, "I honor your path, and now, as the architect of my own life, I consciously choose to carve a new lens for mine. With love, I return the beliefs that no longer serve me." This is not an act of rebellion, but of evolution. It is honoring the past without being chained to it. Finally, the optician of the soul knows that to carve a new lens, he needs to study new geometries. He needs to expose himself to a new light. Therefore, he embarks on a deliberate search for new perspectives. He consciously changes his information diet. If he inherited a scarcity lens, he immerses himself in books, podcasts, and conversations with people who embody an abundance consciousness. If his lens is one of cynicism, he actively seeks out art, poetry, and stories that remind him of the beauty and goodness of the world. He does not do it to think positive, but to provide his mind with new raw material, new light, so that it can learn to project a different movie. You have turned on the light in the projection booth. You have examined the lens that was handed to you at birth. You have understood that it is not your eye, but a filter that can be cleaned and replaced. The power does not reside in forcing a new image on the screen. It resides in the patient and sacred work of carving a new lens, because when you change the lens, the image changes on its own, without effort. Chapter 2, The Mirror of Reality. The second great revelation on the path of the conscious creator, the one that follows the discovery of the lens, is this: the world is not a fortress you must storm, nor an enemy you must defeat. It is a mirror, a perfect, flawless mirror of brutal honesty. This is perhaps the most confrontational and at the same time most empowering idea in all of metaphysics. Our sensory experience presents us with a reality that seems solid, external, and independent of us. We see the circumstances of our life, our financial situation, the health of our body, the dynamics of our relationships as objective facts that happen to us. We fight them, we adapt to them, we complain about them. We live as if we were a reflection, reacting to the light and shadows projected by an external force. The truth, which has been taught by sages from the Kybalion to the Upanishads, is the inverse. You are not the reflection, you are the light, the world is the mirror. This is the principle of correspondence in its purest form. As it is within, so it is without. The law states that your external reality is an echo, a holographic reflection of your inner state. You don't attract what you want. You reflect what you are. Every person, every circumstance, every joy, and every challenge is a direct reflection of the thoughts, beliefs, and above all, the feelings you hold in the depths of your being. Life is not happening to you. Life is responding to you. The physics of the mirror, from projector to projection. How does this mechanism work? It's not magic. It's the physics of consciousness. Your dominant state of being, as we have seen, is a vibrational signature. It's a note that you constantly emit to the quantum field. The field, which is an ocean of infinite potentiality, has no choice but to organize the energy and matter around you to resonate with that note. Imagine that your consciousness is a movie projector. The movie inside the projector is your belief system, your inherited lens. The projector's light is your attention, and emotion is the color and intensity of that light. If the movie you project is one of scarcity, the universe, like a perfectly receptive screen, will show you scenes of unexpected bills, lost opportunities, and constant struggle. If the movie is one of conflict, the universe will reflect back tense relationships, arguments, and misunderstandings. If the movie is one of vibrant health, the universe will reflect back a body full of energy, vitality, and resilience. The mirror does not judge the movie. It does not prefer comedy to drama. Its only function is to reflect with absolute fidelity the image presented to it. Understanding this is the end of the victim game. It is the end of complaining. You can no longer blame the economy for your lack of money. You can no longer blame your partner for your conflicts. You can no longer blame bad luck for your misfortunes. The mirror is simply showing you the movie that you yourself are projecting. The reflection is not the problem. It is the diagnosis. It is the most honest feedback system you will ever have, showing you, moment by moment, what the true state of your inner projector is. The three rooms of the mirror: mental, emotional, and physical. To learn to read this mirror with mastery, we must understand that it reflects our being in three great dimensions, or rooms. The first room, the mental mirror, the reflection of your beliefs. The first and most fundamental mirror room is that of your mind. What you see in the world is a direct reflection of the dominant stories and beliefs that dwell in your consciousness. These stories manifest as the recurring patterns of your life. Think of the dramas that seem to repeat in your existence, often with different characters, but with the same script. Perhaps you have the abandonment pattern. You change partners, but each one, in one way or another, ends up abandoning you. Perhaps you have the non-recognition pattern. You change jobs, but in each one you feel invisible, undervalued, overlooked for promotions. Perhaps you have the almost success pattern. You get right to the edge of a great achievement, and at the last minute something always goes wrong and ruins everything. These are not destinies, they are reflections. They are the external manifestation of a root belief, of an inherited lens. The person with the abandonment pattern probably holds the subconscious belief, "I am not worthy of unconditional love," or "people always leave." The person with the non-recognition pattern believes deep down that "my work is not good enough." And the person with the almost success pattern probably harbors a deep fear of success and visibility. The initiate in the law of reflection, when faced with one of these recurring patterns, does not ask with frustration, "Why is this happening to me again?" He asks with a deep curiosity, "Interesting. What belief within me is still so powerful as to project this same movie over and over again?" The external pattern is not the prison. The prison is the internal belief, and the pattern is simply the jailer showing you, with brutal kindness, where the lock is. The second room, the emotional mirror, the reflection of your vibration. The second room reflects the quality of your energy, your habitual emotional climate. Your vibrational state is a magnet, and it attracts people and situations into your life that resonate with that same frequency. If your dominant emotional state is anger or resentment, even if you repress it and show a kind face, your energy field vibrates with the frequency of conflict, and you will attract, like a magnet, irritating people, frustrating situations, and arguments. The world will constantly give you a reason to be angry, because anger is the music you are playing. If your dominant state is anxiety, you emit a vibration of something bad is going to happen, and the universe, which does not judge, will reflect back a world that seems dangerous and uncertain, validating your fear. On the contrary, if you deliberately cultivate a state of inner peace, your vibration changes. You begin to notice that people are kinder to you, that traffic seems to flow more easily, that situations that used to stress you out, you now navigate with calm. It's not that the world has changed, it's that you have changed the radio station you are tuning into. You have moved from the frequency of chaos to that of harmony. A powerful practice for the initiate is the vibrational audit. It consists of several times a day, pausing and asking yourself, what is the emotional note I am emitting right now? Is it one of expansion or contraction? This simple awareness allows you to, in real time, begin to tune your instrument. The third room, the physical mirror, the reflection of your embodiment. Finally, correspondence manifests on the densest plane, the physical. Your health and your prosperity are the most tangible reflections of your inner state. Your body is the most intimate mirror. An inner state of relentless self-criticism, unresolved guilt or chronic resentment, as we have seen, translates into a body chemistry of stress. And this chemistry, sustained over time, is reflected in the body as muscle tension, inflammation, a weakened immune system, and eventually as illness. A physical symptom is not an enemy. It is the echo of an emotional scream that has not been heard. Your financial situation is equally a brutally honest reflection. The amount of money in your bank account is an indicator, a thermometer of your consciousness of deservingness and your relationship with the energy of abundance. The lack of money is not the problem. It is the symptom of an inner poverty consciousness. It is the reflection of a lens carved with beliefs of not enough, I don't deserve it, or money is bad. The universe is not denying you wealth. It is simply showing you the image of scarcity that you are projecting with unshakable faith. The work of the architect, therefore, is never on the outside. It is useless to try to clean a stain on the mirror. The real work is to clean the stain on your own face. When you change the cause, what's inside, the effect, what's outside, must change by law. It is inevitable. By understanding the implacable precision of this law, one might fall into despair. We might feel overwhelmed by the responsibility, thinking of all the unconscious projections we have emitted throughout our lives. But this is an interpretation born of fear. The most profound and compassionate revelation of this principle is this: the mirror is not a judge, it is a guide. The law of reflection is not a system of cosmic punishment. It is the most perfect and loving feedback system imaginable. Its purpose is not to condemn us, but to reveal to us. Its only function is to show us, with undeniable clarity, the image we are holding in our inner projector, so that upon seeing it we have the opportunity to change it. Every unwanted reflection in our lives, every conflict, every lack, every illness, is not a curse. It is a gift. It is an invitation. It is a love letter from our soul, telling us through the language of circumstances, look, this is the belief you are holding. This is the wound that needs to be healed. This is the part of you that longs for your attention and your love. The mirror does not ask us to fight it. It asks us to look at ourselves. The alchemical change, stopping the fight against the reflection. And here we come to the heart of the practice. Humanity's universal mistake is that we spend our entire lives trying to change the reflection in the mirror. If we see a reflection of poverty, we work harder, trying to paint money onto the mirror. If we see a reflection of loneliness, we try to manipulate others into loving us, trying to force the reflection to smile at us. If we see a reflection of illness, we fight against the body, seeing it as an enemy, trying to erase the image of the symptom. All this struggle is exhausting and useless. It's like trying to comb your hair by combing your reflection. It doesn't work, and yet it's the strategy that most of us employ every day. The alchemical change, the turning point of the conscious creator, occurs at the moment we make the radical decision to turn our backs on the mirror. We stop obsessing over the external world, and we direct all our attention, all our power, all our intention to the only place where true change is possible, the origin of the image, to our own inner state. The initiate knows that their only job is not to do anything in the world. Their only job is to change the movie that is projected in their mind, to polish the lens of their perception. And they have an unshakable faith that if they perform this inner work diligently, the mirror by law must change its reflection. It is not a hope, it is a certainty. The workshop of the image master, integrated practices. The master creator, faced with an unwanted reflection, does not lament. He does not blame. He retreats to his inner workshop and gets to work. His work is not one of physical effort, but of a deep self-inquiry and deliberate reprogramming. One of the most fundamental practices in this workshop is the correspondence journal. The initiate at the end of their day, or when faced with a challenge, takes their journal not to complain about circumstances, but to decipher them. They describe the external event, the reflection, with an almost scientific objectivity. And then they ask themselves the sacred question: if this external situation were a perfect mirror of my inner state, what belief, what feeling, what story within me would it be reflecting? Imagine someone whose constant reflection is a lack of recognition at work. In their journal, they do not write, "My boss is ungrateful." They write, "External reflection. I have completed an important project and have not received any recognition." And then the inquiry begins. What is the internal cause of this reflection? Perhaps it reflects my own belief that I am not good enough, my own inability to recognize my own worth. Perhaps it reflects my fear of becoming visible, and for that reason, I attract situations where I remain invisible. Or perhaps it reflects my own stinginess in giving recognition to others. This process of honest self-inquiry is the first step to identifying the movie that needs to be changed. Once the internal image to be changed has been identified, the master practices the as-if protocol. They dedicate themselves to embodying the inner state that corresponds to the external reality they desire. They do not wait for the reflection to change to feel different. They feel different so that the reflection will change. If they wish to be recognized, they do not beg for recognition. They enter their mental workshop and dress in the garment of recognition. For 15 minutes a day, they deliberately cultivate the feeling of already being valued, competent, and successful. They walk like that person. They talk like that person. They feel the calm and security of that person in their own body. They are creating the internal cause, the new image that the mirror must eventually reflect. Finally, the initiate learns to read every small reflection of their day as a message, as a personal oracle. They transform the world from a series of random events into a constant and meaningful dialogue. If someone is unexpectedly kind, they do not consider it a coincidence. They recognize it as a reflection of the kindness they have been cultivating in their own heart, and they thank the mirror. If they face a frustrating setback, they do not see it as bad luck. They see it as an invitation from the mirror to examine the frustration or resistance that may be within themselves. Every moment becomes an opportunity to calibrate the image they are projecting. Your life is not something that happens to you. It is a work of art that is painted from the inside out. The principle of correspondence hands you the paintbrush and reveals that the canvas and the painter are, in the end, one and the same. Chapter 3. The Physics of Perception, the Observer Effect. The logical mind trained in the matrix paradigm may still harbor a persistent doubt. This sounds good as a metaphor, but does it have any basis in physical reality? To answer this question, we must take the boldest journey of all. We must travel from the world of ancient metaphysics to the world of cutting-edge physics. And it is here, in the most unexpected place, in the cold and rigorous laboratories of quantum physicists, where we find the most astonishing and disconcerting evidence that consciousness is not a passive spectator of reality, but its fundamental architect. Welcome to the principle that dissolves the boundary between mind and matter. Welcome to the observer effect. To appreciate the revolution this entails, we must first understand the universe we thought we lived in, the universe of Isaac Newton's classical physics. It was an elegant, predictable, and, above all, objective universe, a cosmos that worked like a great clockwork mechanism, composed of solid and separate objects that interacted according to fixed laws. In this universe, the moon is there, orbiting the Earth, regardless of whether anyone is looking at it or not. Reality existed out there, solid and separate from us, and our job as observers was simply to measure and describe it. This worldview gave us a great sense of security and allowed us to build most of our technological civilization. But at the beginning of the 20th century, a group of pioneer physicists who began to explore the subatomic realm, the very heart of matter, discovered that, at that fundamental scale, the rules of Newton's universe were completely broken. They discovered a world that was not solid, not predictable, and not objective. They discovered the quantum realm. And at the heart of this new and strange realm, they found the most profound mystery of all, a mystery encapsulated in the famous double-slit experiment. Imagine you have a wall with two vertical slits and a detection screen behind it. If you fire small particles of matter like marbles through the slits, you would expect to see two lines of impacts on the screen, one behind each slit. And that is exactly what happens. Now, if you send a wave like a ripple in water through the same two slits, the wave will split in two, interfere with itself on the other side, and create an interference pattern on the screen, a series of many lines where the crests of the waves have added up and the troughs have cancelled each other out. So far, so logical. Now comes the quantum magic. The physicists decided to perform the experiment with the smallest particles of matter, such as electrons. When they fired the electrons one by one, with the detectors off, what pattern appeared on the screen? Against all logic, an interference pattern appeared. This meant something impossible, that the single electron, as it passed through the slits, behaved like a wave. Somehow it passed through both slits at once and interfered with itself, as if it knew where the future electrons were going to land to form the pattern. The electron, before being measured, was not a thing. It was a wave of pure potentiality. It existed as a cloud of all its possible locations at once. But this is where the mystery gets even deeper. The physicists, perplexed, decided to spy. They placed a detector at the slits to observe which one the electron actually passed through, and the moment they did, the magic vanished. At the precise instant that the observer, the detector, measured the electron stopped being a wave of potentiality. It collapsed into a defined particle, passed through a single slit, and the pattern on the screen reverted to that of two simple lines, like the marbles. Let's pause to absorb the implication of this. The simple act of observing changed the behavior of reality. The consciousness of the observer was not simply seeing an event, it was participating in the creation of the event. The universe did not seem to decide what form to take, wave or particle, until a consciousness paid attention to it. This is the observer effect. It is the most profound and, for many, most terrifying scientific discovery of all time. It completely demolishes the idea of an objective universe separate from us. It suggests that reality, at its most fundamental level, is not a fixed object, but a field of infinite potentiality that awaits interaction with consciousness to collapse into a defined experience. The physicist John Archibald Wheeler, one of the giants of the 20th century, called it a participatory universe, and he said, "The universe is not out there, independent of us. We are inextricably part of it. We are the shapers and the creators." The collapse of the wave in your life. This is not a simple laboratory curiosity. It is a law that operates in your life at this very moment. The universe of your personal experience is a quantum field of infinite possibilities. There is a probability that today will be a day of success and flow. There is a probability that today will be a day of frustration and failure. There is a probability that you will find a brilliant business opportunity. There is a probability that you will face an unexpected expense. All these realities coexist as waves of potentiality in the field. What determines which of these waves collapses into the tangible experience of your day? It is the act of your observation. It is the lens of your perception. When you wake up in the morning, and your first thought, your first belief is today is going to be a difficult day, you are acting as the detector in the double slit. You are directing the focus of your consciousness, charged with the energy of that belief, toward the probability wave of the difficult day. And the quantum field, which does not judge, obeys your observation. It collapses that potentiality into your reality. Throughout the day, your perceptual filter, your reticular activation system, will be in charge of showing you all the evidence that confirms your original observation. When, on the other hand, you wake up and, despite the circumstances, deliberately choose to adopt the perception that today is a day full of wonderful opportunities, you are directing your consciousness toward a different probability wave, and the field, with the same impersonality, begins to collapse that reality for you. You are not thinking positive. You are performing an act of quantum physics. You are selecting a reality from the infinite menu of possibilities through the power of your focused perception. This law explains why two people can live the same objective event and have radically different experiences. Imagine an economic crisis. Person A observes it through a lens of scarcity and fear. Their thoughts are, "This is a catastrophe, I'm going to lose everything, there are no opportunities." Their consciousness collapses the wave of loss. They close their business, lay off their employees, and their reality confirms their perception. Person B observes the same event, but through a lens of opportunity. Their thoughts are, "When there is change, there is opportunity. What new needs are emerging? What old industries are going to disappear, creating a space for something new?" Their consciousness collapses the wave of opportunity. They pivot their business, create a new service that adapts to the new reality, and end the crisis stronger and more prosperous than before. The external event was the same. The difference was the observer. The power of your perception is the power to collapse worlds, and this power is exercised moment by moment through the quality of your attention and the direction of your focus. You are the director of the movie of your life, not only in a metaphorical sense, but in a physical sense. You are literally choosing which scene from the infinite cosmic script you are going to illuminate with the light of your consciousness. we have discovered the most radical truth of modern physics, that we are active participants in the creation of the universe. We can no longer see ourselves as passive victims of a pre-existing reality. We are the observers who collapse the wave. This realization gives us immense responsibility and power. If our perception shapes reality, the most important question of our life becomes, how do we exercise this power deliberately? How do we go from being accidental observers to conscious architects of our observation? For most of our lives, we have been unconscious observers. Our inherited lens, like an autopilot, has been defaulting our consciousness to the probabilities of struggle, fear, and limitation. We have been collapsing day after day a reality that corresponds to our programming without realizing that we had the power to choose. The awakening of the conscious creator is the moment they take control of the light focus. The master understands that observation is not a passive act, but a skill that is trained, and the training is based on two fundamental tools. The first is focused intention. It is the ability to deliberately choose what you are going to look for in the field of potentiality. Before starting your day, instead of entering it with a blank mind and at the mercy of external stimuli, the architect of observation defines their intention. They consciously decide what kind of reality they choose to collapse that day, a reality of flow, of connection, of opportunities. This intention becomes the command they give to their reticular activation system, their inner guardian. The second tool is sustained feeling. The quantum field does not respond to a cold, analytical observation. It responds to an observation charged with energy, to a vibrational signature. Feeling is what gives your observation its power to collapse the wave. When you hold your intention not only as a thought, but as a feeling in your body, the feeling of your wish already fulfilled, you are creating the coherent electromagnetic signature that tunes into that same reality in the field of potentiality. You are emitting the frequency that makes the probability manifest. The Quantum Observer's Workshop integrated practices. The initiate in the mysteries of consciousness does not leave their power of observation to chance. They cultivate it with a daily and deliberate practice, transforming their being into a finely tuned instrument for creation. The most fundamental practice is that of the daily blueprint. The master creator does not begin their day by reacting to the world they see. They begin their day in stillness, deciding the world they will choose to see. Before the sunlight enters the window, they turn on the light of their consciousness. They take their journal not to make a to-do list, but to write the script of the reality they choose to collapse. They do not write, "I want to have a productive day." They write in the present tense, as if it were a fact. Today I observe and collapse a reality of creative flow and unexpected solutions. I see evidence of harmony in my relationships. I feel a deep sense of peace and of the universe's support in all my actions. This is not an act of fantasy. It is an act of command. It is the director giving the first instructions to their cosmic production team to charge this observation with the power of feeling. The initiate practices the art of quantum gratitude. They give thanks, not for what their five senses have already shown them, but for the reality that they know their observation is collapsing at this very moment. In their meditation, the master does not ask. They give thanks. They close their eyes, evoke the image of their wish fulfilled, generate the feeling of their reality, and then whisper to the quantum field, "Thank you for the perfect health that my consciousness is making real in my body. Thank you for the abundance that my observation is attracting into my experience. Thank you because it is already done." This act of anticipatory gratitude is the most potent emotional signature that can be given to the quantum field. It is the proof of faith that demonstrates you understand the law. And finally, the master practices refocusing reality throughout the day. When the mirror of the world shows them an image that does not correspond to their blueprint, a challenge, a criticism, a setback, the untrained observer reacts with fear or frustration. And in doing so, they direct all the powerful light of their attention to that unwanted reality, giving it more energy and solidifying it even more. The master, on the other hand, performs the practice of refocusing. First, they acknowledge the reflection without resistance. Ah, here an old projection of fear is appearing. Interesting. Second, they withdraw their light focus from that image. They don't fight it, they don't deny it. They simply stop feeding it with their attention. And third, they deliberately redirect their light focus back to their inner vision, to the blueprint they chose in the morning. They don't fight the shadow. They simply stop illuminating it and choose, over and over again, to illuminate the light. The physics of perception reveals the deepest and most liberating truth. The world does not define you. You define the world through the eyes with which you choose to see it. You are not in the universe. The universe is in you, waiting for your observation to give it shape. Chapter 4, the first act, the awareness of the lens. Most of us live our lives like fish in water, without having the slightest idea what water is. Water for the fish is not something in its environment. It is the environment itself. It is total, unquestionable reality. In the same way, our beliefs, our inherited perceptual filters don't seem like beliefs. They seem like the truth, the way things are. Awakening to the awareness of the lens is the equivalent of the fish for the first time realizing the existence of water. It is the moment when you take a step back from your own mind and observe with an almost dizzying astonishment the operating system that has been running your life from the shadows. This is the art of self-observation without judgment. It is not an act of criticism. It is not to find what is wrong with you. It is the act of a curious scientist, of an anthropologist who studies a strange and fascinating tribe, the tribe of their own thoughts and automatic patterns. The anatomy of your personal lens. Your lens is not a single piece of glass. It is a complex structure, composed of several layers that we must learn to differentiate and observe. The first layer, the inner dialogue, the soundtrack of your reality. The most superficial and constant layer of your lens is your inner dialogue. It is the incessant narrator in your head, the voice that comments, judges, interprets, and gives meaning to every moment of your life. For the untrained mind, this voice is you. You believe that your thoughts are your identity. The first act of awareness is to create a separation. It is to realize that you are not the voice. You are the silent listener behind the voice. This narrator has its favorite themes, its favorite genres. The observer's job is to identify these patterns. Is your narrator a pessimistic film critic who always finds fault, anticipates disaster, and reminds you of your worst past performances? Or is it a dramatist who turns every small setback into a tragedy of epic proportions? Or perhaps a skeptical scientist who demands proof and data for everything and dismisses any hint of intuition or magic? Becoming an observer of your own inner dialogue is like sitting in a movie theater, and for the first time realizing that the soundtrack is not part of the movie, but something that can be changed. The second layer, the emotional climate, the atmosphere of your being. Beneath the chatter of thoughts lies a deeper and more powerful layer, your habitual emotional state. It is your inner climate. It is not a fleeting emotion, but the general atmosphere in which you live. Some people live in a perpetual climate of anxiety. It is a subtle fog of worry that stains even their happiest moments. Others live in a climate of irritation or resentment, a constant low pressure that threatens to become a storm at the slightest provocation. Others in a climate of apathy or boredom, a stagnant and lifeless calm. This emotional climate is the most powerful color filter of your lens. It colors every perception. If your climate is anxiety, even good news will be perceived through the filter of, what if something goes wrong? If your climate is resentment, even a kind gesture will be interpreted as manipulation. Becoming aware of your habitual climate is realizing that the bad weather is not necessarily out there in the world. It is often a low-pressure system that you are generating from within yourself. The third layer, the root beliefs, the laws of your personal universe. This is the deepest and most invisible layer. They are the foundations of your lens, the fundamental assumptions about reality that you accepted as absolute truths in your childhood. They are the laws of physics of your personal universe. Beliefs about yourself. I'm not good enough. I am different and I don't fit in. I have to be perfect to be loved. Beliefs about others. People always abandon you. No one can be trusted. Beliefs about life. Life is a struggle. Good things never last. There isn't enough for everyone. These root beliefs are the master programs that generate your inner dialogue and your emotional climate. They operate from the depths of the subconscious, and often we are not aware that we have them until we do some deliberate excavation work. They are the invisible walls of the prison that we believe to be the world. The awakening of the witness, the practice of mindfulness. The art of self-observation is cultivated through the practice of mindfulness. It is not a technique for relaxing, although relaxation is a side effect. It is a rigorous training of attention to be able to see your own lens with clarity. The observer's first exercise, anchoring in the present. The untrained mind lives in a state of time travel. It is either lost in the regrets and glories of the past, or it is anxious about the catastrophes and hopes of the future. The only place it is not is in the here and now. Your lens can only be observed in the present. Therefore, your first practice is to learn to return to the now. The simplest technique is anchoring in the breath. Several times a day, pause, and for 60 seconds bring all your attention to the physical sensation of your breath. Feel the air entering and leaving. Do not try to change anything. Simply observe. This act pulls you out of the whirlwind of your thoughts and anchors you in the tangible reality of your body. Another technique is sensory anchoring. Stop and name in your mind 5 things you can see, 4 things you can feel, 3 things you can hear, 2 you can smell, and 1 you can taste. This exercise forces you to leave the narrative of your mind and connect with the sensory world around you in this precise instant. These practices are like taking the car to the shop for an alignment and balancing. They bring you back to your center. The second exercise, labeling without judgment. Once you have learned to anchor yourself in the present, you can start to observe the objects of your consciousness. While in your state of observation, you will begin to notice the thoughts and emotions that arise. The practice of labeling consists of naming these mental events in a neutral, detached way. When a thought of worry arises, instead of being dragged into its story, simply label it mentally. Worry. When you feel a wave of anger, label it. Anger. When a judgment about yourself appears, label it. Judgment. The act of naming creates a separation. You realize that you are not the worry. You are the consciousness observing the worry. You are de-identifying from the contents of your mind. You are turning on the light in the projection booth and realizing that you are not the movie but the space in which it is projected. The third exercise, compassionate curiosity. This is the step that transforms simple observation into a healing alchemy. Once you have labeled a thought or emotion, instead of trying to get rid of it, you approach it with a gentle curiosity. You become a compassionate friend to your own mind. Ask yourself, interesting, where does this thought of fear come from? What past wound is it trying to protect? What unmet need is this sadness trying to express? You don't have to find an intellectual answer. The simple act of asking the question with an intention of compassion and understanding, instead of with judgment and rejection, changes your relationship with your inner world. You stop being at war with yourself. This first act of the awareness of the lens is the most crucial of all. It is the moment when the prisoner realizes that the walls of their cell are not made of solid stone, but of projected light. It is the moment when they realize that they have been staring at the screen, forgetting that they are the projectionist. This awareness in itself is immensely liberating, but it is only the first step. Now that you have learned to see your lens, you are ready for the second act, the work of polishing it, refocusing it, and ultimately replacing it. In the next chapters, we will become the engineers of our perception. The initiate in the mysteries of the mind understands a fundamental alchemical principle. Pure, non-judgmental consciousness acts as a universal solvent. The ego's patterns, fear, anger, scarcity, are like knots of frozen energy. They can only maintain their solid form and their power over us in the darkness of unconsciousness. When you illuminate one of these patterns with the warm, accepting light of your attention, something miraculous begins to happen. The knot begins to soften. The frozen energy begins to melt and flow again. You don't have to fight your negative patterns. In fact, fighting them feeds them. Your only task is to observe them with a presence so total and so compassionate that they simply cannot sustain their form in the face of the immensity of your consciousness. Darkness is not fought, it is illuminated, and when illuminated it is revealed as what it always was, an absence of light, not a force in itself. The workshop of the conscious optician integrated practices. The master of the mind is not content with labeling their thoughts. He becomes an archaeologist of his own psyche, an optician who polishes and shapes the lens of his perception. This is not a work of force, but of subtle curiosity and discipline. One of the most transformative practices is the deconstruction journal. The initiate, at the end of their day or when faced with a painful reflection in the mirror of their life, takes their journal not to complain about reality, but to deconstruct it. They take one of the root beliefs that they have identified through self-observation, for example, I am not good enough, and instead of accepting it as a fact, they place it on the operating table of their consciousness and begin to ask it questions. They ask themselves, whose voice is this originally? And by listening carefully, they often discover that this voice is not theirs, but the echo of a parent's voice, a teacher's, a childhood wound's. This discovery is monumental. It separates the self from the belief. The belief ceases to be a part of their identity and becomes an inherited program. Then they ask themselves, what is the real objective evidence that this belief is an absolute truth? And by examining their life, they realize that, although there have been failures, there have also been countless successes, moments of competence, of kindness, of worth. They see that their mind has been carefully selecting the evidence to keep the old story alive. Afterward, they ask a compassionate question. What was the original protective purpose of this belief? Perhaps the belief of not being enough prevented them from taking risks that, in their childhood, could have been dangerous. By understanding its protective intention, they stop seeing the belief as an enemy and see it as an outdated guardian. And finally, they ask themselves, what is the cost of continuing to look at the world through this lens? They write down the missed opportunities, the sabotaged relationships, the suppressed joy. This step creates the leverage necessary for change. Once the old belief has been exposed, deconstructed, and understood, the master does not simply leave it there. He performs a conscious ritual of release and replacement. He knows that symbols and rituals are the language that the subconscious understands perfectly. The practice can be as simple as writing the limiting belief on a piece of paper. The initiate holds the paper in their hands, closes their eyes, and in a brief meditative act, thanks the belief for the service it provided in the past. And then they declare their sovereignty. Thank you for your service. I no longer need you. I release you with love. Immediately after the release, the master knows that he cannot leave a void. He takes a new sheet of paper and writes his new empowering belief, the new lens he chooses to install. For example, my worth is intrinsic and inexhaustible. I am a unique and valuable expression of the universe. He reads this new law aloud, not as a hope, but as a decree, and he places this new decree in a visible place, like his desk or the bathroom mirror. The initiate knows that a new belief, like a young plant, needs to be nurtured to grow strong. Therefore, he embarks on a deliberate hunt for positive evidence. He becomes a collector of proof that validates his new lens. He dedicates a section of his journal entitled Proof of My New Reality. And every day his mission is to find and write down at least one small piece of evidence from his day that supports his new belief. If his new belief is the universe supports me, he writes down the fact of having found a parking spot right in front, or the unexpected call from a friend. If his new belief is I am creative, he writes down the small idea he had in the shower. This exercise actively retrains his reticular activation system. He is giving his brain's guardian a new command. Stop looking for proof of my limitation and start looking for proof of my magnificence. And the guardian, who is obedient, begins to show him a world that corresponds to the new directive. The first act of creation is not an act of doing, but of seeing. By becoming the non-judgmental observer of your own lens, you have reclaimed the fundamental power. You have gone from being the unconscious character in the movie to being the conscious projectionist who has turned on the light in the booth and is examining the movie he has been projecting his entire life. This awareness in itself is immensely liberating, but it is only the first step. Now that you have learned to see your lens, you are ready for the second act, the work of polishing it, refocusing it, and ultimately replacing it. Chapter 5. The Fire of Reframing. In traditional alchemy, the first agent of transformation was fire. Fire does not destroy the base metal. It softens it, purifies it, makes it malleable, and prepares it to be molded into a new and higher form. In the alchemy of the mind, reframing is that fire. It is the application of an intense and deliberate consciousness that does not deny reality, but transmutes its meaning. The fundamental truth underlying this power is this: human beings do not react to events. We react to the story we tell ourselves about events. The event itself is neutral. It is a blank canvas. The happiness or suffering we experience does not reside in the event, but in the frame, in the interpretation, in the meaning that our lens projects onto it. Imagine two people who are fired from the same job. The objective event is identical. The first person frames it through a lens of scarcity and failure. The story they tell themselves is, "I have failed. I am not good enough. I will never find another job this good. My future is uncertain and dangerous." This story generates the emotion of fear and powerlessness. And this vibration, as we know, will attract a reality that corresponds to it. The second person, a practitioner of reframing, consciously chooses a different frame. The story they choose is, "Interesting. The universe has closed this door for me. This is not an end, it is a redirection. This is the opportunity I needed to at last explore that business I've always dreamed of, or to find a job that is truly aligned with my purpose. This is not a loss, it is a liberation." This story generates the emotion of curiosity and possibility, and this vibration will attract a completely different reality. The external event did not change. What changed was the frame, and by changing the frame, everything changed. The art of reframing is the art of becoming the conscious narrator of your own life. It is ceasing to be a passive reader of a horror story and starting to write an epic of triumph using the exact same events. To master this alchemical fire, we must learn to apply it to the four great resistances of life: failure, pain, criticism, and obstacles. The first alchemy: transmuting failure into wisdom. Failure is, for the untrained mind, the most feared experience. It is perceived as a verdict, as a final sentence on our worth. The inherited lens of the matrix has programmed us to believe that failure is a mark of shame, irrefutable proof of our inadequacy. And this fear of failure is the cage that keeps most of humanity living small, safe lives, never daring to seek their true greatness. The alchemist of perception knows that this is the greatest of lies. He understands that failure is not the opposite of success. It is an indispensable part of the path to success. No one in the history of humanity has achieved mastery in any field without having failed, not once but hundreds, thousands of times. The fire of reframing is applied here through a simple but powerful question. What if this were not a verdict, but a lesson? The old lens, the mirror of shame. I failed at this project. This proves I'm not smart, talented, capable enough. I should give up. This perception leaves you paralyzed, hurt, and with less confidence than before. The alchemical lens, the mirror of wisdom. This project did not produce the result I expected. This is data. It is invaluable feedback from the universe. What is it teaching me? It is teaching me that my initial strategy was flawed. It is teaching me about the market. It is teaching me about my own weaknesses, which I can now strengthen. This is not a failure. It is the tuition payment for the most valuable lesson I could receive. Now I am wiser and better prepared for the next attempt. With the first lens, failure robs you of energy. With the second, failure gives you energy. You have transmuted it from poison into medicine. The initiate in this art learns to see their life not as a search for perfection, but as a laboratory of experimentation. Every failure is an experiment that has produced a result, and there are no failed experiments. There are only experiments that produce unexpected results, results that contain crucial information. Thomas Edison, when asked about his thousands of failed attempts to invent the light bulb, masterfully reframed the situation. "I have not failed," he said. "I have just found 10,000 ways that won't work." That is the mind of the alchemist. The master knows that the size of their success will be directly proportional to their ability to fail, learn, and try again. They embrace failure, not because they like the pain, but because they know it is the chisel that carves the masterpiece of their mastery. The second alchemy, transmuting pain into compassion. If failure is the great test for our ego, pain, loss, a broken heart, grief, is the great test for our heart, the inherited lens of the matrix teaches us to see pain as a mistake, as a failure in life's system, something that shouldn't be happening. And our reaction is resistance, denial, the desperate attempt to anesthetize it. The alchemist, although he feels pain with the same intensity as anyone else, frames it in a radically different way. He knows that pain is inevitable in the human experience, and instead of resisting it, he honors it as a sacred teacher. The fire of reframing is applied here through the question, what is the gift hidden in the heart of this wound? The old lens, the mirror of bitterness. I have suffered this loss. Life is unfair and cruel. I will never open my heart again, so I don't get hurt again. This perception leaves you locked in a fortress of resentment and fear, isolated from life. The alchemical lens, the mirror of compassion. I am experiencing immense pain. This pain is proof of how much I have loved, and this experience, as devastating as it may be, is carving a new depth into my soul. It is opening me up to an understanding of human suffering that I did not possess before. This pain is not breaking me, it is opening me. It is making me a more compassionate, wiser, and more human person. Pain, when met with an open consciousness, acts as an alchemical solvent that dissolves the walls of the ego. It breaks our heart, yes, but it breaks it to open it to a deeper connection with all of humanity. The wise person is not the one who has avoided suffering, but the one who has allowed their suffering to transform them into a source of greater love. The initiate learns not to waste their pain. They see it as an initiation. They know that the depth of the sadness they are able to feel is directly proportional to the height of the joy they are able to experience. The wound becomes the place where the light enters. The third alchemy, transmuting criticism into information. Criticism, the judgment of others, is one of the great tests on our path. The inherited lens of the matrix, programmed with a deep need for approval, teaches us to see criticism as a personal attack, as a validation of our fear of not being enough. Our reaction is defense, anger, or shame. The alchemist, on the other hand, has learned to depersonalize criticism. He knows that what others say about him is rarely about him. It is a reflection of the other person's lens. The fire of reframing is applied here through the question, what useful information, if any, can I extract from this? The old lens, the mirror of the wounded ego. I have been criticized, they are attacking me, they must be wrong. Or worse, maybe they are right and I am a fraud. This perception leaves you trapped in the drama of the ego, in a spiral of reactivity. The alchemical lens, the mirror of information. I have received some feedback. First, what does this tell me about the person who is giving it? What is their worldview, their emotional state, their intention? Second, is there 1% of truth in their words that I can use to improve? Is it showing me a blind spot that I had not seen? Criticism ceases to be an attack and becomes a data point, one that you can calmly analyze, extract what serves you, and discard the rest without any emotional baggage. The alchemist uses the energy of criticism as a sharpening stone to polish their own work, instead of allowing it to hurt them. The inherited lens of the matrix has taught us to see the obstacle as a barrier, as an unequivocal sign that we are going in the wrong direction. The appearance of massive resistance is interpreted as a sign from the universe telling us, stop, give up, this is not for you. This perception generates frustration, drains our energy, and often leads us to abandon our greatest dreams just before the breakthrough. The alchemist of perception, on the other hand, has learned to apply the fire of reframing to the resistance itself. He knows that the universe does not place obstacles in our path to stop us, but to strengthen us. The fire of reframing is applied here through the most powerful Stoic principle of all. The obstacle is the way, the old lens, the mirror of the block. I have encountered an insurmountable problem. This is a sign that I should give up. Life is telling me no. This perception turns you into a victim of circumstances. The alchemical lens, the mirror of training. I have encountered an obstacle. Interesting. The universe has just presented me with the exact exercise I need to develop the muscle of the skill or character I am weakest in. This obstacle is not blocking my path. It is the next stretch of my path. It is not a barrier. It is a training partner. Imagine an entrepreneur who dreams of launching an innovative app. Just before the launch, he discovers a massive technical flaw that delays the entire project by 6 months. With the old lens, this is a catastrophe, proof that his idea was doomed. He falls into despair. With the alchemical lens, the entrepreneur reframes the situation. Okay, the universe has given me a gift of 6 months. Clearly, there is an engineering or project management lesson I need to learn before I can handle the level of success I am asking for. This obstacle is not a punishment, it is my free, intensive master's degree. I am going to use this time to make the product 10 times better. The obstacle does not change, the meaning given to it does. And by changing the meaning, the emotional response changes and therefore the final outcome. The alchemist does not ask life for a path without obstacles. He asks for the perfect obstacles that will sculpt him into the person capable of achieving his destiny. The initiate in the art of reframing does not leave his alchemy to chance. He turns it into a deliberate practice, a habit of consciousness. One of the most potent tools in his workshop is the transmutation journal. The master does not use his journal to record events, but to transmute their meaning. At the end of a difficult day, he does not simply write, "Today was a bad day." He performs alchemy on the page. First, he describes the victim story, the automatic and negative interpretation that his inherited lens has projected onto the day's events. Then, on a new page, with the title The Creator's Story, he deliberately rewrites the narrative from a frame of power. He looks for the gold in the lead of every event. He transforms failure into lesson, criticism into information, and obstacle into training. This act of rewriting is a powerful act of reprogramming. It is giving the subconscious a new movie, a new story for it to accept as the truth. The master also cultivates the habit of the alchemical question in real time. The moment he faces a challenge and feels the contraction of the old perception, he is not dragged along by it. He introduces a conscious pause, and in that pause, he asks the question that changes everything. What is the most powerful and useful way to see this situation? Or, what would the most elevated version of myself see in this moment? This question is like a switch. It short-circuits the reactive program of the victim and activates the prefrontal cortex, the brain of the conscious creator. It pulls you out of the horror movie and seats you in the director's chair. Finally, the alchemist understands that words are spells that solidify perception. Therefore, he becomes a master of his own language. He performs a linguistic alchemy, consciously replacing words that frame powerlessness with words that frame power. A problem becomes a challenge or a growth opportunity. A failure becomes a lesson or an experimental data point. A loss becomes a release or a space for something new. It's impossible becomes, it will be an interesting challenge to figure out how to do it. He knows that language does not just describe reality, it creates it. Reframing is not an act of self-deception. It is not superficial, positive thinking that denies difficulty. It is the deepest act of sovereignty. It is the recognition that you are the source of meaning in your own universe. Events do not have an intrinsic meaning. It is you, the observer, the architect of perception, who gives it to them. Chapter 6, The Water of Forgiveness. Now we come to one of the most misunderstood and at the same time most liberating acts of the human experience. An act that we often mistake for weakness, but which is in reality the demonstration of sovereign power. Before we can understand the power of forgiveness, we must first look without fear at the face of its opposite, resentment. Resentment is not a simple, fleeting emotion of anger. Anger is a clean energy, a quick fire that, if allowed, passes and purifies. Resentment, on the other hand, is anger that has not been released. It is petrified anger. It is the act of taking a recording of a past wound and replaying it in an endless loop in the cinema of our mind. When we cling to resentment, we become the jailers of our own emotional prison. We voluntarily chain ourselves to the memory of a pain and to the person or circumstance that caused it. We believe, from the logic of the ego, that by keeping our grudge alive, we are punishing the other. We believe that our resentment is a weapon we point at our offender. But this is a tragic illusion. Resentment is, as the proverb says, the act of drinking poison every day and hoping the other person will die. The only person who is poisoned, The only one who suffers is us. At a biochemical level, every time we evoke a memory of resentment, our nervous system does not distinguish between the past and the present. For it, the wound is happening again, right now. It releases the same cascade of stress hormones, adrenaline, cortisol, that it released at the time of the original trauma. By clinging to grudges, we keep our body in a state of chronic fight or flight. Our immune system weakens, inflammation increases, digestion is interrupted, and blood pressure rises. We are literally sacrificing our health and vitality on the altar of our need to be right. Why do we do this? Why do we cling so tenaciously to a poison that is killing us? Because resentment offers the ego a very seductive reward, an identity. The identity of the victim. When we are in the state of resentment, our ego has a clear and powerful story. In this story, we are the good guys, the innocent ones, the wounded, and the other is the bad guy, the guilty one, the executioner. This narrative, although painful, provides us with a strange sense of security and moral superiority. It absolves us of all responsibility. It gives us the right to complain, to lament, and to receive sympathy. Clinging to resentment can become the cornerstone of a person's personality, and letting go, forgiving, then feels like a death, like the loss of who I am. The first step toward healing is to recognize this dynamic. It is to understand that resentment is not a weapon, but a shield, a very heavy shield that protects us from the vulnerable task of taking responsibility for our own happiness. Deconstructing forgiveness, what it is not and what it is. To be able to use forgiveness as the tool of liberation that it is, we must first strip it of the false beliefs that our culture has projected onto it. First, let's explore what forgiveness is not. Forgiveness is not condoning. Forgiving someone does not mean you are saying what you did was okay. It is not excusing harmful behavior. You can completely forgive someone and at the same time hold the firm conviction that their action was unacceptable. Forgiveness is not forgetting. Forgetting is an act of amnesia. Forgiveness is an act of consciousness. It is not about erasing the memory, but about dissolving the emotional charge that accompanies it. The memory of the event remains, but it no longer has the power to hurt you. It becomes a scar, a reminder of a healed wound, not an open wound. Forgiveness is not necessarily reconciliation. You're not obligated to have that person in your life again. You can forgive someone from a distance, and out of self-love, choose to maintain a healthy separation forever. And most importantly, forgiveness is not a gift you give to the other person. This is the biggest misunderstanding. The other person may never know you have forgiven them. They may never change. It doesn't matter. Forgiveness has nothing to do with them. So what is forgiveness? Forgiveness is an act of personal sovereignty. It is the moment you declare with unshakable authority, I will no longer allow an event that occurred in the past to continue to dictate my emotional state in the present. I, and only I, am the creator of my inner peace. Forgiveness is an act of energetic alchemy. It is the conscious process of taking the lead of a painful memory, and through the power of your intention, dissolving its toxic emotional charge, releasing the vital energy that was trapped in it so that it can be used in the creation of your present. And ultimately, forgiveness is an act of radical self-healing. It is choosing your own health, your own happiness, and your own freedom over the fleeting satisfaction of the ego of being right. It is the antidote you take for yourself. The two rivers of forgiveness. The act of forgiving flows in two directions, and both are equally crucial for our wholeness. The first river is forgiveness of others. It is the act of releasing our complaint against the world. It is letting go of the emotional debt we believe others owe us. To achieve this, the first step is comprehension, not justification, but comprehension. It is the conscious effort to see the person who hurt us not as a monster, but as a wounded human being. Hurt people. So often, the person who caused us pain was simply acting out a program of suffering that they themselves had inherited, acting from their own level of consciousness, from their own distorted lens. By seeing their wound, we do not excuse their behavior, but we depersonalize the wound. We stop seeing it as an attack directed specifically at us and see it as a manifestation of their own pain. And from that place of comprehension, the door to compassion opens, and from compassion, forgiveness becomes not only possible, but natural. The second river, and often the most powerful and difficult to navigate, is self-forgiveness. Guilt for a past mistake, for a decision we regret, for not having been enough, can be an even heavier burden than resentment toward others. We become our own jailers, condemned to a sentence of lifelong self-punishment. Self-forgiveness requires the application of that same radical compassion to the person we were in the past. It requires us to understand that that previous version of ourselves is not the same person we are today. They did the best they could with the consciousness, knowledge, and emotional resources they had available at that time. If they had known how to do better, they would have done so. Self-forgiveness is the act of recognizing that the lesson has already been learned and that continued punishment no longer serves any purpose. It is giving our obedient mind the command that the sentence is over. It is declaring ourselves free and deserving of a new beginning, not from innocence, but from the wisdom that that very wound has granted us. These two rivers, forgiveness of others and self-forgiveness, are born from the same source, the conscious decision to choose peace over conflict and love over fear. They are the water that cleans the lens, that purifies the crucible, and that prepares the ground for the sowing of a new and more magnificent reality. The alchemical workshop of the heart, practices of liberation. The intellectual understanding of forgiveness is the first step, but true healing, real transmutation, happens through practice. The initiate in the mysteries of the mind does not just understand forgiveness. He practices it as a sacred ritual, as the alchemical act that turns the lead of pain into the gold of peace. The first ritual, the ceremony of liberation, forgiveness of others. The initiate knows he cannot approach this work lightly. He prepares his sacred space. He lights a candle, plays soft music, and makes sure he will not be interrupted. He understands that he is about to perform a surgery of the soul. The first step is raw expression. He takes his journal and writes a letter to the person who hurt him. This is not a letter to be sent. It is an act of purging, of vomiting of the soul. He pours onto the paper, uncensored, all his pain, all his anger, all his disappointment, every word that was never said. He does not worry about being spiritual or kind. He allows the poison to leave his system and be deposited on the page, recognizing that only what is recognized can be healed. After the purge, when the emotional intensity has diminished, the most difficult part begins, the search for comprehension. On a new page, he tries to perform the most radical act of empathy. He tries to write a brief letter from the other person's perspective, not to justify their behavior, but to try to understand their world, their wound, their fear, their level of consciousness at that time. He asks himself, what pain might this person be carrying to have acted this way? This step does not absolve the other, but it begins to depersonalize the wound. He stops seeing it as a specifically directed attack and starts seeing it as a manifestation of their own pain. And from that place of comprehension, the door to compassion opens, and from compassion, forgiveness becomes not only possible, but natural. Finally, the moment of the decree of liberation arrives. The initiate sits in silence, closes his eyes, and visualizes the person in front of him. He sees them not as a monster, but as a fellow soul playing a difficult role in the play of his life. And from the center of his heart, he pronounces his declaration of sovereignty aloud or mentally. The words may vary, but the energy is always the same. I see you. I acknowledge the pain our interaction has caused in my life, and today I choose to be free from it. I let go of all need for punishment, all desire for revenge, all judgment. I understand that you did the best you could with the consciousness you had, and I did the best I could with mine. I no longer give you the power to determine my peace. I forgive you not because you deserve it, but because I deserve to be free. I cut this chain now. I wish you peace on your path. And I, now, choose my own peace. The final act is symbolic. The initiate takes the letters he has written and burns them safely, or tears them into the smallest possible pieces. As he watches the paper consume or disintegrate, he visualizes the energetic cord that tied him to that past, dissolving into light. He feels a new lightness in his body, a new space. The second ritual, The tribunal of self-compassion, self-forgiveness. For self-forgiveness, the initiate convenes an inner tribunal, not a tribunal of judgment but one of compassion. He visualizes himself in a courtroom. In the dock sits the version of himself from the past, the one who committed the mistake he feels guilty about. First, he gives the floor to the prosecutor, who is none other than his own inner critic. He allows him to present his case with all his force. The prosecutor presents all the evidence of guilt, the harm caused, the lost opportunities, the stupidity of the act. The initiate listens to this monologue of self-criticism without interruption, recognizing the voice of the old program. Then he calls the defense. The defense attorney is his higher self, his inner guide, the wisest and most compassionate part of his being. The defender does not deny the facts, but he reframes them with love. He reminds the tribunal that the accused back then acted from a place of fear, ignorance, or pain. He reminds them that he did not have the consciousness he has now. He presents as evidence the lesson learned, the wisdom gained, the growth that arose precisely from that mistake. Finally, the initiate assumes his true place. He sits in the judge's chair. This judge is not the punitive judge of society. He is the embodiment of universal consciousness, of grace and unconditional love. After having heard both sides, the judge stands and pronounces the final verdict. And his voice is yours. Having heard all sides, this tribunal acknowledges the pain caused by the actions of the past, and it also recognizes that the accused acted from their level of consciousness at the time. The lesson has been learned. Remorse has been felt. The sentence of self-punishment has lasted long enough. By the power that resides in me as the sovereign consciousness of this life, I absolve the accused of all guilt. I declare him forgiven. I declare him free. Case closed. The initiate strikes an imaginary gavel, and he feels the weight of decades of guilt vanish from his shoulders. He feels the silence of peace in the courtroom of his soul. Forgiveness as a daily practice. The initiate knows that forgiveness is not a one-time event. The great rituals are for deep wounds, but true mastery resides in turning forgiveness into a daily spiritual hygiene practice. At the end of each day, the master does not go to sleep with the small emotional rubble of the day. He performs a quick clearing of accounts. In a moment of silent reflection, he asks himself, was there any small offense, any frustration, any judgment toward me or others that happened today and needs to be released? And with a simple exhale, he lets it go. He inhales peace and exhales the small grievance, refusing to allow it to take root in the garden of his mind. He does not allow the weed of resentment to grow again. Forgiveness is the water that dissolves the darkest stains on our lens. It is the act that frees us from the chains of the past and gives us back the totality of our energy to create in the present. A heart full of resentment has no room for joy. A heart that has mastered the art of forgiveness becomes an ocean of peace, capable of reflecting the light of the universe without distortion. Chapter 7. The Perception of Wealth. The vast majority of humanity lives in a state of collective hypnosis regarding money. We have been conditioned to see prosperity as something external to us, a finite and scarce resource for which we must struggle, compete, and sacrifice. We chase money, worry about it, envy it in others, and feel guilty for desiring it. And in all this drama, we make the fundamental mistake. We focus on the symbol, completely forgetting the substance. Money is not wealth. It is a reflection of wealth. It is the shadow projected onto the wall of Plato's cave. To chase money is to chase a shadow. The master of metaphysics does not chase the shadow. He turns around and focuses on the light that projects it. And that light is a state of consciousness, a quality of perception. The first forbidden truth about prosperity is this: abundance is not a quantity to be accumulated in a bank account. It is a perception to be cultivated in the mind. You don't earn wealth, you perceive it. And by perceiving it, you collapse it into your reality. To change your financial reality, you must first change the lens through which you look at it. You must uninstall the scarcity lens that was inherited by you and consciously carve a new and powerful abundance lens. And to do so, we must first examine with ruthless honesty the anatomy of our old and distorted perception. The anatomy of the scarcity lens, The scarcity lens through which most of humanity observes the world is not an objective view of reality. It is a program, a mental software composed of a set of root beliefs that color every perception and generate a reality of struggle and limitation. 1. The belief in limitation. This is the foundation of the scarcity lens. It is the belief that we live in a zero-sum universe, like a fixed-size pie. If someone takes a large slice, inevitably, there is less left for others. This perception turns life into a competition. It makes us see others not as collaborators, but as rivals in the struggle for limited resources. From this lens, someone else's success is perceived as a threat to our own. It generates envy, resentment, and a constant anxiety to get our share before it runs out. This belief is a direct contradiction of the observable nature of the universe, which is a field of infinite expansion and abundance. But the lens is so powerful that it blinds us to this truth. A person looking through the lens of limitation can be surrounded by opportunities, but their mind, programmed to see scarcity, will simply not register them. 2. The belief in unworthiness. This is the most personal and painful belief. It is the subconscious feeling of "I don't deserve it." This belief can have its roots in childhood, in messages that we were not good enough, or in cultural dogmas that associate wealth with evil. A person with a lens of unworthiness is a master of self-sabotage. Even if money comes into their life, their subconscious, loyal to the root belief, will find a way to get rid of it. They will create an unexpected crisis, make a disastrous investment, or fall into compulsive spending. Why? Because prosperity creates an unbearable cognitive dissonance with their identity of not being deserving. Their system needs to restore coherence between their inner world and their outer world. The lens of unworthiness makes you feel uncomfortable with abundance. It makes you ask for less than you are worth, charge less than you deserve, and accept less than life longs to give you. 3. The belief in struggle. This is the hard work program. It is the belief that value and reward are intrinsically linked to suffering, sacrifice, and exhausting effort. No pain, no gain is its mantra. The lens of struggle makes you distrust everything that comes easily. If an opportunity seems too good to be true, you sabotage it. If you find a path that brings you joy and prosperity, you feel a subtle guilt, as if you were cheating. Your identity is so tied to that of the fighter that without a battle, you don't know who you are. This lens blinds you to the most elegant truth of the universe, that creation at its highest level is not an act of force but of flow. The oak tree does not struggle to grow, it simply allows itself to be. 4. The fear of money. This is the most paradoxical belief. On a conscious level, we all want more money, but on a subconscious level, many of us are terribly afraid of it. The fear of corruption. The belief that money changes you, that it will turn you into a selfish, superficial, or bad person. The fear of responsibility. The belief that having a lot of money brings overwhelming pressure and responsibilities that we will not be able to handle. The fear of loss. The terror of having it and then losing it all is for many worse than never having had it. The fear of rejection. The belief that if you become prosperous, your friends or family will reject you, envy you, or see you differently. This fear acts as a powerful repellent. It's as if one part of you is stepping on the gas of desire, while another much larger part is stepping on the brake of fear, and the result is a stall full of smoke and frustration. These 4 beliefs, limitation, unworthiness, struggle, and fear, are the primary filters that make up the scarcity lens. Together, they project a constant movie of lack, stress, and missed opportunities on the screen of our lives. The first glimpse through the abundance lens. To be able to change, we first need a vision of the alternative. How does a person who has polished their lens and perceives reality from abundance see the world? The perception of abundance is not a positive hallucination. It is a clearer vision and more aligned with the true nature of the universe. It is based on a series of radically different principles. Wealth as a flow, not as an accumulation. The first and greatest difference is that the abundance lens does not see wealth as a pond to be filled and protected, but as a river of energy that flows constantly. The goal is not to hoard, but to become an increasingly wide channel for that flow. The person with a perception of abundance understands that money, like energy, must circulate. They are as comfortable giving as they are receiving. They know that the more value they allow to flow through them into the world, the more flow will return to them. Security does not reside in the amount of stagnant water in the dam, but in the unshakable confidence in the inexhaustible source of the river. Wealth as a reflection of value, not effort. The abundance lens does not equate time or sweat with value. It understands that prosperity is not a reward for suffering, but a consequence of the value created. Its central question is not, how can I work harder? But, how can I create more value? It focuses on cultivating its unique gifts, on creatively solving problems, on serving others in a way that no one else can. It knows that if it becomes a source of exceptional value, the universe, through the symbol of money, will inevitably reflect that truth. Wealth as a tool, not as an identity. The person who looks through the abundance lens does not fuse their identity with their bank account. They understand that money is a tool, a wonderful resource that allows them to amplify their purpose, take care of their loved ones, and contribute to the world in a more meaningful way. They enjoy money, use it wisely, but their sense of worth does not depend on it. They know that if they lost everything tomorrow, they would still be the same complete and valuable person with the ability to generate it again. This perception frees them from the fear of loss and allows them to take calculated risks, invest with audacity, and act in the financial world from a place of power and play, not of fear and need. This is the world seen through a clean lens. It is not a utopia. It is our natural state, a birthright we have forgotten. And the rest of this journey will be dedicated to giving you the tools to cleanse your old inherited lens and to carve with intention and mastery this new and powerful perception of abundance. The Alchemical Workshop, Forging the Abundance Lens. Understanding the architecture of the scarcity lens is the first step. Now we enter the workshop of the soul's optician, not to wipe away a small smudge, but to carve and polish a completely new lens. This is not a work of force, but of subtle discipline and persistent dedication. It is the work of the artist. The first practice, conscious deconstruction. The initiate in perceptual mastery knows that before building the new, he must consciously dismantle the old. You cannot build a palace on the foundations of a ruined shack. This practice consists of taking your inherited lens to the laboratory of your consciousness and examining it under the light of truth. The master takes his journal, which is not a book of complaints, but a laboratory notebook, and for each of the 4 fundamental beliefs of scarcity, he becomes a Socratic interrogator, an archaeologist of his own psyche. Facing the belief of limitation, he asks himself, is it really a universal truth that resources are finite, or is it that my attention has been trained to focus only on finiteness? Can I, in this moment, find evidence of infinite abundance in the world, in nature, in human creativity and love? By doing this, he begins to create cracks in the prison wall. Facing the belief of unworthiness, he asks himself, whose voice is this that says I don't deserve it? Is it really mine? Or is it the echo of a parent, a teacher, a society? Does my worth as a being really depend on my achievements? Or is it intrinsic and unconditional like the worth of the sun? By depersonalizing the voice, he takes away its power. Facing the belief of struggle, he asks himself, is effort the only measure of worth? Or is there a form of creation that comes from flow, from joy, and from alignment? Do I know anyone who prospers by doing what they love? What does that teach me about what is possible? And facing the fear of money, he asks himself with radical compassion, what is this fear really protecting me from? Is it protecting me from judgment, from responsibility, from rejection? Thank you, fear, for your attempt to keep me safe. But now, I consciously choose a new form of security, one that comes from expansion, not contraction. This process of deconstruction, performed with relentless honesty, is like removing the old dirty glass panels of a greenhouse. Suddenly, a new light can begin to enter. The second practice, affirmation as lens carving. Once the space has been created, the optician of the soul begins to carve the new lens. And the main tool for this carving is the affirmation, the conscious decree. The master does not repeat empty phrases. He understands that every affirmation is a chisel blow on the crystal of his consciousness. He creates his master decree of abundance. It is not a plea. It is a declaration of the new law of his personal universe. It could sound like this: I am the source and center of my own abundance. The universe is infinitely generous, and I am an open and receptive channel for its prosperity. Money flows to me easily, constantly, and joyfully from multiple sources, for my good and the good of all. Every dollar I spend enriches the world and returns to me multiplied. I live in a state of gratitude, security, and financial freedom. And so it is. The initiate takes this decree and turns it into his daily practice. He practices it in the mirror, looking into his own eyes, forging a new relationship with his own deservingness. He repeats it like a lullaby before sleeping, handing the blueprint to the subconscious architect. Each repetition is an act of carving, which slowly but surely shapes the new lens through which he will begin to perceive the world. The third practice, visualization as simulation. An architect doesn't just draw blueprints, he creates a 3D simulation to walk through the building before it is built. The conscious creator does the same. He uses visualization not as a fantasy, but as a simulation of the room. The master sits in silence and dresses in the garment of the soul of his prosperous self. He does not limit himself to seeing images of wealth. He immerses himself in the state of wealth. He asks himself, what does it feel like to have absolutely no worries about money? And he generates that feeling in his body, the relief in his shoulders, the calm in his stomach, the deep breathing. Then from that state, he walks through the scenes of his life. He sees himself opening his mail, not with fear of bills, but with a quiet curiosity. He sees himself having a conversation about money, not with shame or anxiety, but with confidence and clarity. He sees himself making investment decisions not from panic, but from serene, intuitive guidance. This practice is not to attract money. It is to train his nervous system to become familiar with the frequency of abundance. It is to make the feeling of wealth feel so normal, so natural, that the state of scarcity begins to feel strange and alien. The fourth practice, the alchemy of everyday language. Finally, the master knows that the polishing of the lens happens in every moment with every word. He becomes a guardian of his vocabulary, knowing that words are spells that solidify perception. When faced with a desire, the automatic phrase from the scarcity lens, I can't afford it, is replaced by the alchemical question from the abundance lens, how can I create it? The first phrase is a closed door. The second is a door open to infinite creativity. The phrase of struggle, I have to work very hard, is replaced by the phrase of value. I enjoy creating immense value for others. The focus shifts from sacrifice to joyful service. The phrase of loss when paying a bill is replaced by the phrase of circulation. I bless this money as it flows through me, knowing that the universe is a system of perfect circulation. Each of these linguistic substitutions is a conscious act of polishing the lens, of wiping away a small stain of scarcity and replacing it with the shine of abundance. Perception is not a passive window through which you look at a fixed world. It is an active projector that shapes the world you look at. Wealth is not an external condition you chase. It is a perceptual decision you cultivate. It is the conscious act of taking off the dark, scratched lens of scarcity that was handed to you and choosing day after day with loving patience and the discipline of a master to carve and polish the crystalline golden lens of abundance. Because when you change the lens through which you look, the world you look at has no choice but to change. Chapter 8. The Perception of Value. The scarcity consciousness makes a fundamental mistake. It chases money. It sees money as the object, the prize, the substance of wealth. But money is not the substance. It is the symbol. It is the shadow. To chase money is to chase a shadow. The master of metaphysics does not chase the shadow. He focuses on the object that projects it. And that object, the true substance of all prosperity, is value. Money in its ebb and flow is not a moral or random force. It is a messenger. It is a feedback system that flows naturally and inevitably to a single place, toward what is perceived as valuable. If you want to attract the flow of money, you should not focus on the money. You must focus on becoming a source of immense value. But here we encounter the core of the problem. Like our perception of abundance, our perception of value has been profoundly distorted by inherited programming. We have been conditioned to look at value through a broken lens, and as long as we continue to use that lens, our ability to create and attract wealth will be severely limited. The broken lens of value, the three illusions. To be able to carve a new lens of value, we must first deconstruct the three great illusions that make up the old one. 1. The time for money trap. This is the fundamental illusion of the industrial age, the mental software under which most of us still operate. It is the belief that our value is directly proportional to the number of hours we work. We sell our time, the unrecoverable fabric of our lives, in exchange for a salary. This lens traps us in a cage of linear limitation. If your value is measured in hours, then your earning potential will always have a ceiling. There are only 24 hours in a day. The only way to earn more under this paradigm is to work more hours, sacrificing your health, your relationships, and your joy of living. It is an equation that inevitably leads to burnout or resignation. The conscious creator understands that people don't pay you for your time. They pay you for the value you create during that time. A surgeon can earn in 1 hour what another person earns in a month. Why? Not because their hour is intrinsically more valuable, but because the perceived value of the solution they offer, saving a life, is immense. The universe does not reward hours. It rewards value. Freeing yourself from the time for money trap is the first and most important act of financial sovereignty. 2. The myth of effort is value. This is a more subtle but equally limiting illusion. It is the belief that the harder a task is, the more we suffer to perform it, the more valuable it must be. It is the ethic of sacrifice, the idea that if it doesn't hurt, it's not working. This lens leads us to a strange form of self-sabotage. We often undervalue our greatest gifts, the things we do with ease, with joy, in a state of flow, our natural genius. We often undervalue precisely because they don't cost us great effort. Anyone could do this, we tell ourselves, and then we dedicate ourselves to difficult tasks we don't like, believing that's where true value lies. The master of abundance understands the opposite truth. Your greatest value to the world does not reside in what costs you the most effort, but in what comes most naturally to you. Your zone of genius is the place where your unique talents and passion intersect, and when you operate from that place, you create exceptional value with an energy of joy and flow that is magnetic. Stopping equating effort with value is giving yourself permission to prosper by doing what you love. 3. The fallacy of external validation. This is the illusion that turns us into victims of the market. It is the belief that our value is not something we declare, but something the world bestows upon us. We expect a boss to tell us how much we are worth through a salary. We expect a client to tell us how much our services are worth through their budget. We expect the market to tell us how much our idea is worth. This perception places us in a passive and reactive posture. We become beggars for validation, accepting the value the world assigns us, instead of being the kings who declare their own value. We compare ourselves, compete, and adjust our price down out of fear of not being chosen. The conscious creator knows that value is not assigned. It is declared. Value is a perception, and the first place that perception must be created is in our own minds. The alchemical perception of value, the new lens. To free ourselves from these three illusions, we must install a new and powerful lens. The alchemical perception of value is based on three fundamental truths. First truth: value is a transfer of energy and transformation. True value does not reside in the product or the service itself. It resides in the transformation that product or service generates in the recipient. It is an energetic transaction. A cup of coffee does not have value because of the beans or the water. Its value resides in the transformation it offers, the energy to start the day, the ritual of the pause, the warmth on a cold morning. A book does not have value because of the paper and ink. Its value resides in the transformation it offers, a new perspective, an emotion, an escape from reality. A good doctor does not have value because of their degrees. Their value resides in the transformation they offer, the path from pain to health, from anxiety to peace. When you shift your focus from what I am selling to what transformation am I offering, your perception of value expands infinitely, and you begin to look for ways to make that transformation as deep and powerful as possible for the person you serve. Second truth. Value is subjective and perceptual. Value is not an intrinsic and objective quality. It is a perception in the mind of the recipient. The same glass of water has almost no value to a person sitting next to a river and infinite value to a person lost in the desert. This means that the art of wealth is not the art of creating things, but the art of understanding and solving valuable problems for a specific group of people. The bigger and more painful the problem you solve, the greater the perceived value of your solution. The master of abundance does not ask, "What can I sell?" He asks, "What problem that I am exceptionally qualified to solve can I solve for others?" Third truth. You are the source of value. And here we come to the heart of the alchemy of prosperity. Value is not something you do, it is something you are. It is the natural and effortless expression of your unique being, of your unrepeatable combination of talents, passions, experiences, and wisdom. Your job is not to add value to yourself. It is to remove the layers of limiting beliefs that are hiding the immense value that already resides within you. It is the work of discovering, accepting, and expressing your unique gift. The universe does not ask you to be like anyone else. It asks you to be the fullest and most authentic version of yourself, because it is in that authenticity that your greatest value to the world resides. This perception changes everything. You stop seeking validation outside. You stop measuring your value in hours or effort. And you start the real work, the inner journey to discover and polish the diamond of your own being, knowing that, once it shines with all its intensity, the world will have no choice but to recognize its value and reflect it in the form of an abundant and joyful prosperity. The alchemical workshop of value, forging a new lens. Understanding the architecture of the scarcity lens is the first step. Now we enter the workshop of the soul's optician, not to wipe away a small smudge, but to carve and polish a completely new lens. This is not a work of force, but of subtle discipline and persistent dedication. It is the work of the artist who sculpts himself. The first practice, the archaeology of your genius. The initiate knows that their greatest value is not something they must invent, but something they must unearth. They become an archaeologist of their own soul, searching in the layers of their history for clues to their unique gift, that treasure that has often been buried under the rubble of conditioning. This practice is a deep dive into the journal. The master sits in silence and follows three paths that lead to the heart of their purpose. The first path is the trail of childhood passion. The archaeologist travels back in time to the age of 7 to 14, before the world told them what was practical, profitable, or respectable. And he asks himself the question, what did I love to do with a pure, unconditioned passion? What activity made me completely lose track of time? Perhaps it was drawing fantastic worlds, organizing his toys with meticulous precision, taking apart gadgets to see how they worked, or simply sitting and listening to the stories of his elders. In these childhood passions often lies the DNA of our natural genius, the purest expression of our soul before the inherited lens distorted it. The second path is the trail of sacred frustration. The master examines the world not with cynicism, but with the eye of a reformer. And he asks himself, what problem in the world, in my community, or in my industry, frustrates or outrages me in a way that makes me think, someone should do something about this and I know how it could be better. This is not an ordinary complaint. It is a sacred frustration. It is the voice of our soul pointing out an imbalance that we have come to heal, a chaos that we have come to bring order to. Your greatest frustration often points directly to your greatest contribution. The third path is the trail of effortless skill. The archaeologist takes an inventory of the skills that come so naturally to them that they don't even consider them skills. They are the things that others point out. You always know what to say to calm people down. You have an amazing ability to simplify complex ideas. You organize things in a way that makes perfect sense. Often, our greatest gift is like water to a fish, so omnipresent in our being that we take its value for granted. The initiate writes down their discoveries from these three trails, and then they look for the intersection. They look for the point where their childhood passion, their sacred frustration, and their effortless skill converge. In that intersection, in that sweet spot, lies the heart of their unique value in the world. The second practice, the declaration of value. Once value has been discovered, it must be declared. The master does not wait for the world to place a price on it. He announces his value to the universe and to himself. This is the practice of creating a declaration of value, an affirmation of purpose that becomes the new fundamental law of his personal universe. It is not a marketing slogan. It is a decree born from inner archaeology. It could be structured like this: my unique value resides in my ability to effortless skill to solve the problem of sacred frustration in a way that fills me with childhood passion. For example, my unique value resides in my ability to organize information simply and beautifully, skill, to solve the problem of confusion and knowledge overload, frustration, in a way that reminds me of the joy of building orderly worlds with my toys, passion. The initiate takes this declaration and turns it into his mantra. He practices it in his mirror work, looking into his own eyes and recognizing his own genius. He repeats it in his meditation, feeling the vibration of his purpose in his body. This is not an act of arrogance. It is an act of alignment. It is the act of carving in the center of his lens a new and powerful inscription that defines his true identity. The third practice, conscious energy exchange. The master understands that value to be real must flow. It must be exchanged. And he consciously practices the two polarities of this flow, giving and receiving. First, he practices giving with detachment. He begins to offer his value to the world, not necessarily by quitting his current job immediately, but through a bridge project, as we have already seen. He begins to share his gift, not from the need to get a reward, but for the simple joy of expression. He writes the article, offers the advice, creates the prototype. He does it as a gift, detached from who receives it or how it is received. This act of giving without need is an incredibly potent vibration of abundance. Second, and often more difficult, he practices receiving with grace. When the universe, in response to his value, begins to send him the reflection in the form of money, opportunities, or appreciation, the initiate must learn to receive it. When he receives a payment for his service, he does not feel guilt or unworthiness. He pauses, and in silence he says, "Thank you. I accept this energy as a fair reflection of the value I have offered. I deserve this." When someone gives him a compliment, instead of deflecting it, he receives it. He lets it in and he simply says, "Thank you." This practice of receiving with grace heals the lens of unworthiness and teaches the subconscious that it is safe and good to be prosperous and valued. It closes the circuit of flow, allowing the abundance that goes out in the form of value to return in the form of wealth. Your value is not a number on a job contract. It is the unique light that only your consciousness can project into the world. It is not something you earn with effort. It is something you reveal with self-knowledge. It is not something the world gives you. It is the gift that you give to the world. Stop asking yourself how much you are worth and start asking, how can I serve with the infinite value that I already am? In the answer to that question, you will not only find your purpose, but the mirror of prosperity will have no choice but to reflect your own radiant magnificence. Chapter 9. The Perception of Opportunity. We live in a vast and leafy forest of possibilities, but our inherited lens, the scarcity lens, forces us to focus all our attention on the single dry tree of our current problem. We complain that there are no opportunities without realizing that we are standing in the middle of an ocean of them, dying of thirst. Opportunity is not something that is found by luck. It is something that is perceived, and perception, as we already know, is not a passive act of receiving information. It is an active act of creation. The world you see is the world your lens allows you to see. To attract more opportunities into your life, you don't have to change your location. You have to change your lens, the four veils that obscure opportunity. Our blindness to opportunity is not a birth defect. It is the result of a series of filters, of perceptual veils that we have learned to place over our eyes. To be able to see, we must first understand what blinds us. 1. The veil of preconception, the old map. The first and thickest of the veils is our belief that we already know the map of reality. We cling to our preconceived ideas about how things work. We believe we know which paths are possible and which are impossible. Business opportunities only exist in the tech sector. To succeed, you have to have a college degree and follow a corporate career path. At my age, it's too late to start something new. These preconceptions are the borders of our world. They act as the guardian of our reticular activation system, automatically filtering and discarding any opportunity that doesn't fit the old map. A revolutionary idea can be presented to us, but if it doesn't look like anything we've seen before, our brain labels it as error or danger and doesn't even allow us to consider it. The initiate in the art of perception cultivates a beginner's mind. He practices the humility of questioning his own certainties, knowing that the moment he believes he knows everything, he has closed the door to the infinity of possibilities he does not know. 2. The veil of fear, the threat lens. Fear is the most paralyzing veil of all. Its primary function is survival, and to fulfill it, it stains our lens with the color of threat. Fear does not see the world as a field of opportunities, but as a minefield. When an opportunity presents itself, the lens of fear does not see the potential for gain. It obsesses over the potential for loss. An investment opportunity is not seen as a door to wealth, but as a risk of losing savings. An opportunity to lead a new project is not seen as a platform to shine, but as public exposure to failure and criticism. An opportunity for a new relationship is not seen as an adventure of love and connection, but as the inevitable prelude to a future broken heart. Your subconscious mind, in its attempt to protect you, will actively make you blind to opportunities that your lens of fear has labeled as dangerous. It is a mechanism of self-preservation. The problem is that it is protecting you from life itself. To be able to see opportunities, you must first be willing to feel insecure. You must be willing to accept that all growth resides just on the other side of the border of fear. 3. The veil of I'm not ready, perfectionism. This is the most subtle and seductive veil for the ambitious mind. Unlike the veil of fear, which makes us flee, this veil makes us wait. We see an opportunity, our heart races, we know it's for us, but immediately the lens of perfectionism intervenes and whispers the most paralyzing lie of all. I'm not ready yet. I need to take one more course before I can launch my business. I need to lose 10 pounds before I can start looking for a partner. I need my product to be absolutely perfect before I can show it to the world. We wait for the perfect moment, the perfect conditions, the perfect version of ourselves. But the perfect moment never arrives. It is an illusion. And while we wait, the window of opportunity, which is always temporary, gently closes. The master creator understands that preparation is important, but that imperfect action is infinitely more powerful than perfect inaction. He knows that you don't prepare for the opportunity and then seize it. He knows that you launch yourself into the opportunity and prepare as you go. Clarity and competence do not come before action, they come through action. 4. The veil of disguise, opportunity as a problem. Finally, the most deceptive veil of all is the one that prevents us from recognizing opportunities because they rarely present themselves as such. Life's greatest and most transformative opportunities almost always arrive in disguise. And their favorite disguise is that of an insurmountable problem. The economic crisis that destroys an industry is not just a problem. It is the opportunity to create the industry of the future. The impossible client who complains about everything is not just a problem. It is the opportunity to get the most honest and valuable feedback to improve your service. The illness that forces you to stop your life is not just a problem. It is the opportunity to reevaluate your priorities and connect with your power of self-healing. The scarcity lens only sees the problem, the crisis, the difficulty. It contracts, complains, and paralyzes. The abundance lens has learned to look through the disguise. It knows that behind every great problem, an opportunity of equivalent or greater magnitude is hidden. It asks, what void in the market is this problem revealing? What unmet need is screaming to be addressed? These 4 veils, preconception, fear, perfectionism, and disguise, are what create our blindness. They are the cataracts in the eyes of our soul. The work of the optician is not to look harder in the external world, but to perform the internal surgery to remove these veils. The change in perception from seeking to seeing. The fundamental change we must make is to stop seeking opportunities and start seeing them. Seeking implies that opportunities are rare, that they are hidden, and that we must struggle to find them. It is an activity born of scarcity. Seeing, on the other hand, is a state of receptivity. It is born from the belief that opportunities are infinite and are everywhere, like the air we breathe. Our only job is not to hunt, but to adjust our vision. And this adjustment, this cleansing of our lens, is an inner work. It is the result of the alchemy we have been exploring, dismantling our limiting beliefs, healing our emotional wounds, and above all, cultivating a state of being of abundance. When your inner vibration changes, your perceptual filter changes with it. When you feel worthy, you begin to see the opportunities that correspond to your worth. When you feel abundant, you begin to see the abundance that surrounds you. It's not about changing the world. It's about allowing yourself at last to see the world that is already there waiting for you to discover it. The alchemical workshop, cultivating the eye of opportunity. The initiate in perception knows that the world does not need to change for them to see opportunity. They know that the only necessary change is internal. They retreat to their workshop, not to build something new, but to remove the veils that obscure their vision. The first practice, the dissolution of certainty. The first and thickest of the veils, preconception, is dissolved with the acid of intellectual humility. The master knows that certainty, the belief that you already know everything, is the most comfortable cage and at the same time the most limiting. To be able to see new possibilities, you must first have the courage not to know. Their practice is the Socratic questioning of their own assumptions. When faced with a deeply held belief about how things should be in their industry or life, they ask themselves with genuine curiosity, what if this were not a universal law, but simply a collective habit? What if the opposite were possible? What would that look like? This simple act of questioning the unquestionable opens cracks in the wall of their perceptual reality, allowing the light of new ideas to begin to filter through. In addition, the initiate deliberately practices seeking novelty. They know that a brain that is only exposed to the same stimuli over and over again creates the same neural connections and therefore has the same thoughts. To shake up their perceptual patterns, they consciously expose themselves to ideas and environments that are outside their comfort zone. They read books about industries they don't know, travel to places with different cultures, and talk to people who have worldviews opposite to their own. They do it not to accumulate more knowledge, but to keep the clay of their mind soft and malleable, to create the possibility of new and surprising synaptic connections, which are the cradle of all innovation. The second practice, the transmutation of fear into a compass. The master does not try to eliminate fear. He knows it is an intrinsic part of human biology, a guardian impossible to banish. Instead, he transmutes it. He learns to use fear not as a stop sign, but as a compass. The practice is an act of real-time reframing. When a new opportunity appears, and the initiate feels the inevitable contraction of fear in their body, they do not flee. They do not get distracted. They pause, they breathe, and with a cultivated calm, they dialogue with their fear. They ask it, "Are you a warning of a real objective danger to my survival, or are you simply the guardian of my comfort zone, the dragon that guards the next level of my expansion?" 9 times out of 10, the honest answer is the second. And the moment he recognizes this, the energy of fear is transformed. It is no longer a signal of danger, retreat. It becomes a neon green arrow that is pointing him in the exact direction he needs to go to grow. The initiate learns to walk toward the feeling of calculated fear, knowing that the cave he is afraid to enter contains the treasure he seeks. The third practice, the cultivation of good enough. To dissolve the paralyzing veil of perfectionism, the master creator replaces the pursuit of perfection with a commitment to iteration. He understands that the universe is a laboratory of feedback. You cannot get the information you need to perfect your creation if you keep it locked away in the secrecy of your workshop. The practice, therefore, is to launch the idea, the product, the version of yourself into the world, when it is good enough. The initiate adopts the minimum viable product mindset. He creates the simplest version of his idea that can provide value and shares it with a small group. And then he listens. He listens to feedback from the real world. What works? What doesn't work? What needs to be improved? And with that information, he returns to the workshop, improves the creation and launches it again. This cycle of creating, launching, listening and improving is infinitely more powerful than the perfectionist's cycle, which is create, doubt, never launch, and die with the idea intact. Imperfect action is infinitely superior to perfect inaction. The fourth practice, the X-ray vision. Finally, to see through the disguise of opportunities, the initiate trains his perception to become an X-ray vision. He cultivates the habit of looking beyond the surface of problems and searching for the structure of need hidden underneath. Faced with any crisis, complaint, or frustration, whether his own or what he observes in the world, the master asks himself two alchemical questions. What fundamental problem is this situation revealing? What is the real deep pain hidden behind this superficial complaint? What product, what service, what solution, what act of value could I create to solve this problem at its root? With this constant practice, the world ceases to be a place full of frustrating problems and is transformed into an ecosystem full of business, service, and creation opportunities. Every complaint he hears is a clue. Every crisis is an invitation. His lens no longer sees barriers. It only sees voids in the market that his unique value can fill. Opportunity is not a needle in a haystack. It is the haystack itself. It is everywhere, in every conversation, in every problem, in every moment. It is not something you find by luck. It is a way of seeing. When you cleanse the lens of your old beliefs, when you learn to look at the world not with the eyes of fear, but with the eyes of possibility, you stop being a seeker of opportunities. You become a magnet for them. The world, your faithful mirror, begins to reflect your new and clear vision, showing you the way at every step. Chapter 10. The Gratitude Lens. Gratitude in the Matrix paradigm is a reactive emotion. It is a polite thank you we say after we have received something. It is an effect. But in the universe of metaphysics, gratitude is not an effect. It is the supreme cause. It is the beginning and the end of all conscious creation. It is the state of being that signals to the universe, with unshakable certainty, that creation has already been completed. It is the signature that seals the contract with abundance. To understand its power, we must return to the law of reflection and the physics of vibration. The universe doesn't give you what you want. It gives you a reflection of what you are. It gives you back an echo of the frequency you emit. And every emotional state has a frequency. Fear and worry emit the frequency of lack. They are a prayer for what you don't want. Desire and longing emit the frequency of absence. Every time you long for something, you are vibrationally declaring that you don't have it. Gratitude, on the other hand, is the only emotion that can only exist from a place of wholeness. It is the frequency of reception. It is the vibrational signature of the wish already fulfilled. When you learn to feel gratitude before the external evidence has manifested, you are performing the most powerful act of faith that exists. You are collapsing the wave of probability through a deliberate choice of your inner state. You are acting as if your wish were already a fact, and the universe, which cannot distinguish between your felt imaginary reality and your physical reality, has no choice but to conform to your new conviction. The gratitude lens is not a tool for thinking positive. It is a way of being. It is a conscious choice to tune your perception to the inherent abundance of the universe rather than to the illusion of scarcity. And this tuning has a triple effect. It transforms your past, anchors your present, and creates your future. The first alchemy, the gratitude that heals the past. The first act of the gratitude lens is to look back, not with regret but with appreciation. Our natural tendency is to regret our mistakes, resent our wounds, and wish our past had been different. We live chained to the story of our suffering. The gratitude lens breaks these chains. It allows us to perform an act of alchemical reframing. It invites us to look at our greatest challenges and ask ourselves the question, what was the hidden gift in this darkness? The business failure that almost ruined you viewed through the gratitude lens, is no longer a source of shame. It is an invaluable lesson in resilience and strategy, and you can say, "Thank you for the wisdom you forced me to acquire." The painful relationship that ended is no longer a story of betrayal. It is the training that taught you to love yourself and set clear boundaries, and you can say, "Thank you for the strength and self-knowledge that were born from that wound." The period of illness is no longer a curse. It is the wake-up call that forced you to take care of your body and re-evaluate your priorities, and you can say, "Thank you for bringing me back to the path of wellness." Practicing gratitude for the past is not denying the pain. It is honoring the wisdom that was born from it. It is the act of extracting gold from lead, of transforming scars into medals. In doing so, you change the vibration of your personal history. You stop being a victim of your past and become an alchemist who has been able to transform your poison into medicine. The second alchemy, the gratitude that anchors the present. Once you have made peace with your past, the gratitude lens focuses on the only moment that exists, the now. The untrained mind, even on a good day, is an expert at finding the single cloud in a blue sky. Its negativity bias, inherited from our evolutionary need to detect threats, makes it constantly scan the environment for problems, dangers, what is missing. The practice of gratitude in the present is the act of deliberately retraining your reticular activation system. It is giving your brain's guardian a new command. Stop looking for dangers and start looking for blessings. The secret to an effective gratitude practice is specificity and sensoriality. It is not enough to think, "I'm grateful for my coffee." The master of gratitude immerses himself in the experience. He closes his eyes. He smells the aroma of the coffee. He feels the warmth of the cup in his hands. He savors the first sip, and he feels a wave of genuine appreciation for the incredible chain of events that made that simple pleasure possible. It is not enough to say thank you for the sun. The initiate goes out into the street and consciously feels the warmth of the sun on his skin, observes how it illuminates the leaves of a tree, and feels a direct connection to that source of life that is 150 million kilometers away. This practice, performed daily, has a profound effect. It pulls you out of the abstract narrative of your mind and anchors you in the sensory richness of the present moment. It dissolves anxiety, which always lives in the future, and floods you with the peace of the now. And most importantly, it tunes your vibration to the frequency of abundance. You are telling the universe, moment by moment, "I already have enough. I am already happy. I am already whole." The third alchemy, the gratitude that creates the future. Now, with the past healed and the present anchored in wholeness, you are ready to use the gratitude lens in its most potent form, as a tool for deliberate creation. The conscious creator does not ask the universe for what he wants. He does not hope that his desires will manifest. He performs the most radical act of faith. He gives thanks for his desire as if it were already an accomplished fact. This is the principle of scientific prayer, elevated to its highest expression. It is the art of living in the end, not with impatient longing, but with serene and confident gratitude. Instead of saying, "I hope I get that job," the master declares in the stillness of his mind, "I am so immensely grateful for my new job, for the opportunity to use my gifts, and for the wonderful prosperity it brings me." Instead of saying, "I need to heal," he affirms, "Thank you, thank you, thank you for the perfect health and vitality that flow through every cell of my body now." This act of anticipatory gratitude is the clearest and most powerful command you can give to your subconscious mind. There is no doubt. There is no hesitation. It is a declaration that, on the plane of consciousness, where all creation begins, the work is already finished. Your subconscious, upon receiving this mental image charged with the high-frequency emotion of gratitude, has no choice but to accept it as a truth, and in accepting it, it must begin to mobilize all the forces of the inner and outer universe so that the reflection in the mirror of your life corresponds to this new and sacred image. The workshop of the grateful heart, integrated practices. The initiate in perception knows that gratitude is not an emotion that is felt by chance. It is a muscle that is trained. It is a quality of consciousness that is cultivated with deliberate and persistent practice. He does not wait for life to be perfect to feel grateful. He uses gratitude to make his life perfect. The first practice, daily immersion in gratitude. The master understands that his state upon waking and falling asleep are the two most crucial moments for programming his lens. The morning tuning ritual. Before the world can project its scarcity onto his mind, the master projects his gratitude onto the world. Upon waking, before any other action, his first conscious act is a gratitude sweep. It is not a quick mental list. It is a feeling that is cultivated in the body. He begins by giving thanks for the simple and often ignored miracle of a new day, for the gift of breath that has flowed through him all night without his effort. He gives thanks for the warmth and security of his bed, for the roof over his head, for the water he will drink. He feels this gratitude as a physical substance, a warmth that expands from his heart. By starting the day this way, he is calibrating his lens to the frequency of abundance from the very first moment. The nightly harvest. In the same way, before sleeping, the master does not review his worries. He performs a harvest of gratitude. He takes his journal and writes down not what he did, but what he received. He looks for the small and great miracles of the day that has ended. A stranger's smile, a meaningful conversation, a delicious meal, a challenge that taught him something, a completed task. By recording this evidence of grace in his life, he is demonstrating to his subconscious over and over that he lives in a friendly universe. And by falling asleep in this state of gratitude, he gives his inner projector the movie of a world in which blessings are the norm. The second practice, the transmutation of the negative. The master does not live in a denial of reality. He knows that challenges, frustrations, and pains are part of the human experience. But instead of allowing these experiences to stain his lens with the color of negativity, he uses them as the raw material for an even deeper alchemy. Gratitude for the problem. Faced with a challenge, the untrained mind asks, "Why me?" The master asks, "For what reason is this happening to me?" And then, he practices the art of giving thanks for the problem itself. It is not a masochistic act, but one of profound wisdom. He understands that the problem is a teacher in disguise. He gives thanks to the challenge for the strength it is forging in him. He gives thanks to the obstacle for the creativity it is forcing him to develop. He gives thanks to the crisis for the purification it is performing on his being. By giving thanks for the problem, he transmutes its energy. He stops being a victim of the situation and becomes its student. Gratitude for bills. One of the most transformative practices is to change our perception of the act of paying. For the scarcity lens, every bill is a pain, a loss. For the gratitude lens, every bill is an opportunity to give thanks. The master, upon paying the electricity bill, does not feel the loss of money. He feels immense gratitude for the electricity that lit his home, that cooked his food, that allowed him to work and connect with the world. He blesses the money that flows through him to pay for that service, knowing that, by the law of circulation, everything that is given with a grateful heart returns multiplied. The third practice, shared gratitude. The initiate knows that gratitude, when shared, exponentially multiplies its power. One of the most potent and moving practices is writing and delivering a gratitude letter. The master chooses a person who has had a positive impact on his life, someone to whom he may never have fully expressed his appreciation. He takes his time to write a detailed and specific letter, describing not only what that person did, but how it made him feel and how it has influenced his life. Then he seeks out that person. He doesn't send the letter. He asks for a moment of their time and reads it to them aloud, face to face. Research in positive psychology, led by Martin Seligman, has shown that this exercise is one of the most effective interventions for drastically and lastingly increasing happiness levels, not only in the recipient of the letter, but above all, in the one who writes and delivers it. It is an act that creates a high-vibration loop that benefits everyone involved. The fourth practice, stoic gratitude. Finally, the master practices the most radical and sharp form of gratitude, one that completely annihilates the habit of taking things for granted. It is gratitude for what has not happened. This practice, inspired by the Stoic philosophers, is called premeditatio malorum, or the premeditation of evils. It consists of dedicating a brief moment to imagining, in a controlled way, the loss of something we value immensely. The initiate sits in silence and allows himself to imagine for an instant that he loses his health. He feels the pang of fear and powerlessness. Then he opens his eyes and returns to the reality of his body, which breathes, which moves, which lives. And he feels a wave of visceral and overwhelming gratitude for the simple gift of health that he had taken for granted a moment before. Imagine the loss of a loved one, feel the emptiness, the pain, and then return to the present and feel immense gratitude for the fact that that person is still in your life. This is not a morbid practice. It is the most powerful tool to awaken from the anesthesia of routine. It forces you to see that your current life, with all its apparent problems, is already a miracle that someone, somewhere, or at another time, would pray for. It anchors you in the radical appreciation of the now. The gratitude lens is not a technique. It is a portal. It is a way of being in the world. It is not something you do. It is someone you become. When you look at the world through this lens, the search for abundance ends because you realize that you have always been swimming in it. You stop asking the universe for miracles because your life itself has revealed itself to be the miracle. Our journey began with the revelation that the world you see is not the world that is. We started as unconscious observers, looking at life through an inherited lens, scratched by old beliefs and stained by past wounds, believing that the reflection in the mirror was the only possible reality. And along this path, we have undertaken the greatest of all alchemies, the transformation of perception. You have learned to be the optician of your own soul. You have turned on the light of consciousness to examine your lens. You have purified it with the fire of reframing and cleansed it with the water of forgiveness. You have learned to carve into it a new perception of your infinite worth, to focus it to see opportunity everywhere. And finally, you have polished it with the vibration of gratitude until it is bright and crystalline. The universe has not changed. The world has not changed. The only thing that has changed is you. You have changed the lens through which you filter the infinite potentiality of the cosmos. Abundance was never out there waiting to be found. It has always been here waiting to be perceived. Wealth, joy, peace are not destinations you arrive at. They are landscapes that are revealed when you, at last, look at the world through new eyes. Your journey does not end with the end of these words. It is now that it truly begins. Your practice from this moment on is reduced to a single question that you will ask yourself each morning upon waking. Through what lens do I choose to see my world today? Remember always, you do not have the power to change the world. You have an infinitely greater power, the power to change the world you see. If this journey of perception has opened your eyes to a new reality, we invite you to continue this exploration. Subscribe to our channel Millionaire Mind for more transforming wisdom. Like this video as a declaration of your new vision. Share this master key with someone who is ready to see the world through new eyes. Thank you for your time, for your courage, and for the brave decision to become the architect of your own perception.